Anybody can jump in, but what were your first impressions?
Well, what I said at the outset, one of the things I was really looking for, I was hopeful that we would get the truth from both sides. I was so sorely disappointed. I could sit here and go down the list of absolute blatant out-and-out lies that the former president put out about 9-month abortions, executing babies, eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. He's never heard of Project 25, doesn't know what's in it. And the xenophobic, aggressively xenophobic spreading of lies about immigrants and refugees. I mean, refugees come to this country, all the data shows that immigrants commit far less crimes, especially illegal immigrants. They're here illegally. The last thing they want to do is stand up and draw attention to themselves. They're over here. They're the guys up on your roof, putting your new roof on. They're the guys in your yard. Go around Doylestown. Hire a guy to come put your roof on, and a guy from Bucks County will come and he'll talk to you. But the guys that come and go up on the roof and put it on, they're all Hispanic, and I'd be willing to bet most of them are here illegally. Everybody wants them to come and put their roof on, but they want to listen to that nonsense, calling them those names, calling them murderers. And it just really is irritating. I was hoping for truth. Instead, we got this childish nonsense.
Ethan, your take.
Well, I was seeing how Kamala Harris was trying to do what Biden did in 2020 and try and play herself as a moderate. But I see through that facade. She's not a moderate. She's a progressive, just trying to get votes from independents. Like, for example, Biden was so neutral on immigration during the debates, but when he won for 3.5 years, he had the border open, and then once it came election time, then he closed it, and then they keep saying that the border was secure this whole time, and she's made some good points from times, but I don't think anything that she says is legitimate, that she legitimately thinks about this. Like, I have no clue what she stands for, because she's flipped up between what she said in the 2019-2020 debates and the 2024 debates right now. Also, what I don't like is that she didn't rebut anything on immigration about the people coming in.
I think that he's making some very interesting points. She is trying to prove some things that are absolutely not true. When it comes to the border, I am a business owner. I am a minority. I know firsthand that the people that are crossing the borders are here to work, but that's not all true on all of them that are crossing the border. I firsthandedly had to let go of some people because of the situation of what's going on and the people who are entering and coming through those borders. So I really do think that, we should allow the ones that are, coming here legally. If they want to be here, if they need, to be saved or whatever the case it is, they should come. Fine, come here legally. Do the right thing. We need to do something with the border. It needs to be closed. I am a business owner, and this is something that I, struggle with continuously, and I have been struggling with. And my husband is a roofer. We own a roofing company, and I do know firsthandedly that, those are the ones that are up there, roofing. He leaves home 4 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes he doesn't come home until 10 o'clock at night when the sunlight allows it. So, they're very hard workers, However, something needs to be done because they're not all good.
Robert, what's your take?
It's been very up and down. I've been getting slightly irritated with actually the both of them. They constantly keep on avoiding the answers, or they're avoiding answering the answers to each of the problems that keep on getting brought up. Granted, both sides of the issues have been talked about, which is also understandable, especially like when you're talking about border control and so on and so forth, because of the fact you get both sides of immigrants that are coming in, but at the same time, we as a country are starting to struggle, and we also want to fix that. So I'm a huge supporter, especially for the border being closed, or at least more tightly, due to the fact we have to fix our own issues. So if people are coming, it should be legally. But then at the same time, a lot of people are seeking refuge. But it's like how certain aspects of people bringing the bad with them. Yeah. And it's just been really confusing on a lot of aspects of the war and healthcare, so on and so forth. They just are going at each other's necks, and they'll start to touch on each individual subject that is actually important without giving any answers. And
Draining.
yeah, and from there it's more irritating than, 'cause especially with people like me as a veteran and as somebody that's kind of on the fence for either or. They're not making it easy to choose somebody that I feel as though is actually right. They're not giving any solutions to any of the problems. And from there, it just seems like it's more entertainment than it is actually debating on problems.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Bridget, how did you feel?
So I definitely agree with Eddie. I wanted to see a more respectful and polite debate. I think that both of the candidates are really good debaters, and I wish that they actually showed that instead of just interrupting each other. I noticed that the former president made a lot of more irrelevant topics, such as when David Muir brought up the topic of the peaceful transfer of power. He mentioned immigrants and just talked about how the Biden administration only wants immigrants in this country to be able to vote, which obviously is not true and was not under the topic of the conversation. He also made some comments such as, and I quote, "Our country has gone to hell," which I do not agree with, and I do not think that someone that's running to support this country and be the face of it should make comments about the same country like that.
By a show of hands, how many of you think that Vice President Harris won this debate?
I would say so. Why do you raise your hand?
Definitely because Vice President Kamala Harris is definitely a better speaker than Donald Trump. That's why I would say that she would probably have won the debate itself. If it were me and if I didn't know, I would probably vote for Kamala Harris herself. That's as an unbiased opinion. Because also as an unbiased opinion as well, while I served, I did also serve under Trump. And why from time to time I will sit and laugh when I hear him speak because he is very entertaining. And that's mainly because he's not a public speaker. But through his actions, there's a lot of things that I do also support that he has done for the country itself. Because I was a huge anti-Trumper when I definitely initially started. But through his actions, I would say up until probably the very end, we're actually for more protecting the country. Granted, it's not necessarily in the best or nicest way, but it was definitely effective at the time. And there are some things that I kind of do miss that we do need to actually pick up on. But it's also making sure that it actually gets done at the same time as well. So I say debating aspects, I would say Kamala definitely won the debate. She had more answers and I guess technically plans, quote unquote, for each topic that was being hit when they weren't, going at each other's necks.
Is that enough to convince you to support her?
Not quite yet. Still need a little bit more time for that.
And for those of you who believe that former President Trump won the debate, why do you
say that he necessarily won the debate? Kamala Harris is a politician, so that is what she's trained to do. She's trained to talk. She's trained to try to convince people. Trump just does. Perhaps maybe he doesn't speak well. Perhaps he doesn't know how to win the public. But he's shown by facts and acts that he just does. What other president has shaken hands with Kim Jong-un? What other presidents have kept the peace? What other president has raised the economy and done what he did when he was a president? So I'm with Trump all the way.
I'm not a Trump guy. I'm not voting for Trump. I'm more so voting against Kamala Harris because from what I saw in that debate, she's just playing an act of a moderate like Biden did in 2020. I talked about that before. She's basically just repeating stuff that Biden says, just in a different way.
Agreed.
Back in 2020, back before he didn't get kicked out because the polls were bad. She talked a lot about just giving money to people, even though that's just going to devalue the dollar even more. She deflected on immigration. She didn't even rebut letting people in illegally. Only conveniently doing it once the election election cycle started. Mm-hmm. And then when you hear things about like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi saying we should make them documented, how is that fair? How is that fair to people that did the right thing, took the time to go through the legal process? That's a slap in the face to them. Then it really says to me that she doesn't believe in anything, especially, which was funny, she took the endorsement of Dick Cheney, which is laughable because everyone hates Dick Cheney, Republicans included. She didn't talk about her policy changes between 2020 and 2024. She deflected on that too. She didn't rebut how she didn't get a single delegate she didn't get a single vote, yet she's somehow in this race because Democrats thought that Biden was capable until they saw how badly he debated. So everything, and then finally, this whole campaign of joy. It's so laughable because there's nothing to be joyful about. Our economy is terrible right now. And they just parade it as, oh, this economy is great. Oh, the economy is good. Even though people are saying, man, our wallet is shrinking. And then she talks about unity. Biden talked about unity in 2020, yet we're still divided. So Biden didn't create unity in 2020. How is she going to create unity in 2024? So basically everything about what I saw from her is fake. And as much as I don't like Trump, at least I know who he is. He's boisterous and he might say things that we don't like, but there is truth to some of the things that he says beyond the lies that he does say. So as much as I didn't want Trump in the Republican primary to win, I'm going to vote for him.
So then just to be clear, because I know you both had nuanced answers, yes or no, do you think the former president won the debate tonight?
No one won the debate, but I would say if people believe in thinking that whatever they saw from Kamala is real, then yes, Kamala won the debate. But if people see through that facade, I think Trump won the debate.
I agree.
And for those of you who thought Harris was the clear winner, explain briefly why you think she prevailed.
Even though not all of the policy talk that she did was as clear or answered the question exactly, she did in fact advance policies and explain what she intended to do. I didn't get any of that from Donald Trump. All I got from Donald Trump was more just outlandish lies.
Overall, and anyone can jump in here, what stood out to you most?
I would say what definitely stood out to me was, even though it wasn't even really part of the topic for majority of the debate, is actually everything that's been going on overseas, from, at least for me, that have been around. I wasn't in the Middle East, I was over in Asia, but still from the aspect of actually dealing with other countries and military powers is extremely important. And a lot of great points that was actually given off by Trump was under the Biden administration and how a lot of our troops were pulled out and are still there currently, and how very sloppily that it was done. It's definitely something that hit home because it made a lot of us very, very angry at what was going on. And I think that's the reason why a lot of times a lot of people, including myself too, have leaned Trump harder, is due to the fact of his action with said issues. What was great about it was called out of how badly that Biden handled a lot of our situation when it comes to military force and presence. And that's something that is more important than a lot of people like to think about and deal with, because I know for a fact it's not something that's more discussed or really knowledgeable for those that are not involved. And I think that would be an interesting take to find out what the Democratic Party plans to actually do with everything, how they will actually handle threats, things that may not be of our interest at the same time, or I guess maybe even a global interest. It is always a mix between me thinking that we should probably mind our business a little bit more and handle our own issues, but then at the same time, if we do mind our business too much, we'll have situations like where Russia's still invading Ukraine, or we still have Hamas and Israel going at it right now.
Just very briefly, I mean, transitioning kind of from foreign policy to democracy, and I particularly want to ask you, Heidi, and you, Ethan, about this. What did you make of the former president's comments when he was asked about the 2020 election? What do you make of the fact that he, in essence, kind of doubled down? I mean, he did not concede still 4 years later. So what do you make of the fact that the former president 4 years later still does not accept the results of the 2020 election?
I think the problem with a lot of people when it comes to not thinking the 2020 election results were legitimate is because we're the only first world country that doesn't have universal voting ID. We don't have proof of citizenship to get a voter ID. In Pennsylvania, you don't have to show your voter ID. Right now, a lot of people don't believe in our democracy because there's so many flaws. He stated that we don't know how, just trying to put all the words together. It's more so about we can't prove that illegals voted, but we can prove that they not voted because we don't have universal voter ID. So there comes into question that little bit of deniability, and that if we had that, there wouldn't be as many of these questions as he would bring up.
Trump is Trump. It doesn't excuse his behavior. We all know how he is and how he has acted previously. So I really do think that, if he has questions, I don't want to call him a sore loser, but he's a businessman. He's not used to losing. He is who he is. Obviously, we all know that he lost. He doesn't want to face it. He doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't want to accept it. That's on him. That doesn't change my way of thinking, with him winning the presidency and voting for him.
And briefly, for those of you who support Harris, did his response tonight give you any pause or make you concerned about the outcome of the 2024 election?
Yes and yes. The peaceful transfer of power, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I took an oath going back in 1968. I took the same oath that he took to support and defend the Constitution. That's what the oath says, not going to defend the borders or anything else, defend the Constitution. But we have a wonderful Constitution. Everybody agrees that it was well done, and it's a great document, but that document doesn't mean anything without the oath. It's that oath of office, that says you're going to defend the Constitution no matter what. That's what counts. When we have a president who refuses to accept a legitimate election and refuses to leave office, tries to get fake electors, and get somebody, the Secretary of State in Georgia, to find votes. When we have a president who doesn't concede an election and tries to stay in power, that violation of his oath of office makes the Constitution worthless. If he gets another term, or if he loses this election, he will not concede this election. and more people sign on with this, and it just fragments the country more and more and more. It's the oath of office that really keeps us free, not the Constitution. And he violated that and will again.
And Bridget, very briefly, how did you interpret his remarks?
I agree completely with Eddie. I think that it's interesting how he didn't question the election that he won, but he questioned the election that he lost. And I think that for this next peaceful transfer of power, I hope to see it actually executed. If he, I hope to see him actually admit that he lost if he does. And I hope, he doesn't go back on the things that he said in 2020.
The other question I want to ask you about, too, just kind of going back to your broad takeaways, but initially when the debate started, what did you think of their body language?
Well, Trump did the hand things a lot. He always does the hand things. He does like a little bit of like a lean. So just typical Trump mannerisms. So I didn't really see anything from Trump. I didn't really, for Harris, it was just, whenever Trump said something, either a lie or something that is truthful, but goes against what she says, she shook her head a lot and she tried to do like this weird smile.
Laughed it off.
Or doing a laugh. So I would say just both of their body movements were typical of what they did compared to what they did in 2020. So,
I mean, how would you characterize the former president's facial expressions?
Unthreatened.
Correct.
Glowering.
Definitely noticed that he was unthreatened.
Word, I think.
I also think that it was very respectful of Kamala to make the motion to shake Trump's hand. I think that was respectful and very professional of her, and I'm glad that she was the one to do that.
yeah, that was good.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, that was good.
Actually, that's what I think is really controversial. Controversial what I said, because it's his face, him standing there, looked unthreatened and unfazed. But when they both came in to stand at their podiums, it almost seemed as though that Trump was avoiding Kamala initially before the handshake. Which at this point, I just take it as they probably just both don't like each other. So.
Oh, that's an
It
understatement.
is what it is.
But he didn't come off angry.
Not
you?
really. Just
No.
what he usually
What
is.
he is who he is.
Just-
Yeah, he
Right.
always comes off as angry.
Exactly.
It's just
Yeah,
more-
it's who
I
he
agree.
is.
I agree.
It's just kind of like the natural look that he, like his eyebrows are a little
His head's big.
down turned, so he looks a little angry all the time. So
And do you think that it was appropriate for the vice president to mouth things like, "That's not true"?
I think that both of the candidates did it a lot, and I think that, in every debate it happens, so I'm not really surprised that it did, because I think that it's just a way for them to stand their ground. I did find it was interesting how Trump made a comment about the comment that Kamala made in the debate against Pence. I think that was just interesting, and I honestly didn't expect it, but.
But yeah, I think a lot of people were expecting Kamala to try and do some sort of "excuse me, I'm talking." That's why people were thinking that she wanted the mics unmuted for the whole thing so she could do that. But Trump did that so as a way of trying to do a gotcha moment, as oh, do you like it when I do that? So I don't know how that will work out for independents and moderates. Do they think that was a good gotcha moment, or was that just kind of ridiculous? But we'll see.
Having the muted mics kind of took away the impact of that because you
Yeah.
couldn't So
So
Talk to me more specifically about some of the things that were said during the debate, and a couple of you referenced it, but that moment where the president or the former president seemed to latch on to what appears to be this conspiracy theory about Haitian migrants and cats.
okay.
I've seen a video on it. There was.
But he seemed to lean into it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. He's using that as his end all be all.
I mean, that's part of his bombastic personality is saying these things because it catches people's attention. So even if something was outlandish, it does draw into the fact. Even if it is a lie, it draws into the overall scope of Springfield, Ohio, of 20,000 Haitian migrants that's been coming up in the the news cycle recently. So
It should be pointed out, by the way, that these are not illegal migrants. They're all in the country illegally. And they fail to mention that when they make up stories about them eating their cat.
That's a great point. It's definitely.
But were any of you surprised that he kind of
Absolutely.
didn't
I was.
refute it?
I was.
I was completely confused on
And
how
does
it got
that
brought
concern
up.
you as somebody who supports him?
It doesn't concern me because he has said a whole bunch of different things in the past. That does not define who he was as a president. Like I said, Trump is Trump, and he talks, and that's what he does. But he acts.
But it's been disproven, and I guess I also wonder, you all are talking about the candidates being truthful and not truthful, but if something's just blatantly not true or conspiracy theory, as someone running for president, shouldn't that be something that he disputes?
Oh, I agree. But look at these other candidates in the past. They're politicians. They have lied. They have said many other things. But just because they're not Trump and they're not as obvious and outspoken as Trump is,
So it's okay to peddle a conspiracy theory?
it's not okay to
To his defense, no, that was actually real because there was police camera footage of them also arresting that woman. She was out on the front lawn because she actually
Yeah,
ended
but
up.
she wasn't in Springfield, and she wasn't Haitian, and she wasn't an immigrant.
Ah,
She killed a neighbor's cat. And that was in Canton, Ohio, which is about, 90 miles away from Springfield? So she wasn't a Haitian, she wasn't an immigrant.
it was in Ohio.
And she wasn't in Springfield.
Good.
But they're using that as proof that this is going on.
Now, let's talk about some of the issues that were raised this evening, starting with the economy. How do you feel about the economy, and did their responses make you feel any differently about your perceptions of how things are right
They
now?
did not discuss the economy enough for me. They did not talk about any plans as of how they, plan on fixing it. It's at its highest as we speak, and I've never seen the economy this high. So I definitely do believe that there should be another debate where we discuss the economy and better protocols and better plans as of how we're going to fix the economy. How are we going to move forward because we're in a big deficit as we speak. What are we going to do?
That being said, though, I know you said at the top that you're a small business owner. We heard the vice president tonight lay out a plan for small businesses.
That was for startups. My business has been standing for quite some time. That's okay, and that is good for those who are starting up. But what is that going to do for my business? What is that going to do for our economy? When it comes to payroll taxes, when it comes to all the expense that we have based on, the way the economy is at its highest. Us small business owners, we're kind of suffering because of it. Our payroll taxes are at its highest. I have never paid as much as we have paid these past 4 years.
And what about in terms of the former president saying, look, we had the best economy when I was president? Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. Totally agree. As a matter of fact, my business grew when he was the president. We went from having a small amount of clients to having over 70% more clients in 1 year.
And what about for those of you who support Vice President Harris? What was your takeaway in terms of some of the proposals she put out in terms of small businesses, this child tax credit?
Child tax credit, I think, is important. And as far as the small business, I'm not a small business owner and never have been. So I'm a little, I'm not the guy to probably speak to that. Incentives for startups are good. It all depends on what we can afford and how much we're investing and what kind of return we're getting for that investment. The child tax credit, for sure, I think is a good idea.
I agree. I think that the economy is in a really rough spot right now. I know a lot of families are living paycheck to paycheck, which I think is so unfortunate. I do think that either plan by either candidate. I just want to see the economy get better. I don't really care. I would like to see it get better under Kamala, but either way, I just think the economy is really important right now. And again, I'm 17, so I don't really have a lot of experience with how the economy was under Trump's presidency because I was 12 or 13. So, it's hard for me to speak on that, but overall, I just hope to see a change and an improvement in the future.
What about, and I don't know if you want to chime in very quickly on the economy?
I have really no standpoint in it so far since I've been alive and I guess living within it. Everything is just getting more expensive and it's workable, but at the same time, it shouldn't be as bad as it has become. Things are just getting harder to do. Really, some of the parts that make me a little bit nervous is about Kamala Harris's plans for the economy because it seems as though it's going to be extremely able to be taken advantage of. And there's going to be plenty, because I've also come from a lot of, places in my upbringing in a lot of low-class areas, and I've seen how people can definitely take advantage of it. And that itself would definitely put more people in more of a deficit than they think.
What about the exchange on reproductive rights? How did you feel about that?
For me, it's been really a little aggravating because at the end of that discussion, still hasn't said whether or not they're going to be pro or against. Granted, Trump has been going over the top, talking about how they're aborting babies at 9 months or having the baby born and then executed. I might be a little too far construed, but at the end of the day, I believe that the choice should be available, and women should not be prosecuted for whatever they do to themselves or for whatever their position is, so on and so forth. That's my standpoint on that.
I agree 100%. I think that Kamala stood her ground on her position. I think that she's always been more pro-choice, and I think that Trump and his administration, he did pass a lot of the whole Roe v. Wade, and I think that that's just so horrible. So I do not like to see him going back and trying to act like he's been this hero and he's saved so many women's lives when he's really done the opposite. And I think that Kamala did well and stood her ground on her position.
What did you make of his response in that exchange? I mean, he was pressed several times on whether he would potentially veto a national abortion ban, and he didn't really answer the question. He just said that it should go to the states and the states are going to decide. How did you feel about his response there?
I think he kind of avoided it. He didn't want to touch the subject. He didn't convince me. He did not convince me.
Are you concerned about an abortion ban?
In that aspect, I am. I do believe in a woman's right to choose in certain circumstances. So we should really, I believe there should be another debate and this should be discussed.
I mean, do you think he's been clear enough on his position?
No, I don't think so.
How did you think he answered that question?
So he avoided the question, obviously. Avoided giving a real answer because he knows that there's a large section of evangelical and pro-life people that will withhold their votes if he says that he would veto it. So that's why he danced around
Correct.
it. So now he said it goes to the states, and he tried to emphasize that it's the voters' rights to put abortion protections and make it a state referendum that abortion will be protected in the states. So he tried his best to try and give a non-answer or deflect it, but because that's really all he could do at that point, because it's a tough spot to be in now as a Republican, because they saw in the 2022 midterms how Roe v. Wade affected the midterms. So I'm pretty confident that they know if they do get in office again and they have a unified House, Senate, and presidency, I'm confident that they won't do a national abortion ban because they know in the midterms that they're just going to lose the majorities anyways.
One of the things that did strike me is that every time that came up, he went again through this litany of every legal authority and every legal scholar agreed. Everybody on both sides wanted this to go back to That's not true. Nobody on this side wanted it to go back to the States. It was not a universally popular idea. And I think it's, I've heard often this referred to as the dog that caught the car. Now, you know, they eliminated Roe v. Wade. Now they don't know what to do because it's very, very unpopular. And so you said dancing around. Tap dancing around is exactly what he was doing.
I want to get back to immigration. I know you raised that as a key issue. Do you feel that the former president and the vice president, for that matter, did enough to address the issue overall? Were your questions answered?
They were. I know what Trump stands for when it comes to immigration. We know, well, we have seen what Biden and Harris have done to this country by not securing the border. So to me, those questions were answered.
I mean, what did you make of the one exchange where he kind of said, you know, she needs to go back to Washington and deal with this right away?
Trump is Trump, and he told her what she needed to do. She needs to stop beating around the bush, and they need to do something because it's serious. What is going on in America right now due to this immigration crisis is serious.
You talked about your husband quite a bit in our earlier exchange. I mean, obviously, you know, the former president, which he did in the debate tonight, but also has done on the campaign trail, you know, has talked about these murderers coming into our country and, you know, terrorist, rapist. I mean, how do you feel when he makes those kinds of comments?
I don't agree with him totally. I do know that there are some immigrants that are seeking refuge, and those are the ones that need to be here. You want to come to America, come here legally. But we also have to face the fact that some are here illegally, and some of them are here, and some of them are criminals. Some of them are running away where they're coming from because they don't want them where they're at. And a lot of them have a lot of mental health issues. I've seen it firsthand. So I agree with that. I mean, the border should be tightly controlled and monitored.
And for those of you who support Harris, I guess, Eddie and Bridget, how did you feel about the vice president's responses on immigration? And overall, do you think that she and the president have done enough to secure the border?
And the current president, you mean? No, everybody. I agree that we need strong border controls. I don't believe that we can deport everybody in the country that's not here, you know, documented today. Not only is it physically impossible, I mean, it's just to say, day one, I'm going to deport 11 million people. It isn't physically possible, and our economy would collapse if we did. You know, whether we like it or not, our economy is very, very dependent upon this labor. And so quit telling me that you're going to do this. It's nonsense. So I was very, very unhappy about that.
I agree completely. I think that immigration was one of the topics that I was the least satisfied with. I think that none of them really gave like a strong answer and a strong plan that I agree with. So I definitely want to see more improvement in that. And I think that Eddie mentioned a lot of good topics about like you can't just like wipe all of them out. You know what I mean? They're such hard workers, and I think that they're so good for this country.
But in what way? What did you want to hear from the vice president?
I just wish that she gave a more detailed plan and that she actually had things that she outlined that like, I'm going to do this and that's going to create this, because again, like as politicians, you just jump around topics, and I do wish that she had a more firm policy on it. So yeah, in the future, definitely want to see some improvement on that.
Absolutely.
And is the border an issue for you as you consider who to support?
It's definitely weird. The border is actually extremely important and extremely, it has to be more on a lockdown, more or less, so to speak. Because it's almost like everywhere else at the same time, too, for, say, if you were, or if anybody else were to travel here, even as Americans. Some are good, some are bad. But at the same time, we do have more issues that we have to handle, and I don't think that we can afford to just constantly let everybody and anybody in. So I believe that if you are able to come here, then you should definitely come here legally and as for deportation, that I don't think is going to be able to actually be done. So maybe if we do end up closing the borders, the ones that are here, they're here. And you have to move on from that.
And I know we touched on this very briefly earlier, but did it surprise any of you that this conspiracy theory about Haitian migrants and cats came up during this part of the debate? And what was your reaction to that?
Yes, even Donald Trump, I did not think was going to go there. This is the most ridiculous conspiracy theory, and there's been some pretty ridiculous conspiracy theories thrown out. This is just, how could he possibly bring that up? It's just beyond belief.
Thank you. When he mentioned that, I was initially had that same reaction. I was like, what was he doing? I try and rationalize it, and I'm like, okay, well, he said that, so what's going to be the fallout from that? Like, how's people watching from home going to think about that? Well, people are going to look it up. Are they like, the moderators said that was false, but people are going to look it up anyways because everyone has to do their research nowadays. So I think even though what he said is false, it's going to bring eyes to the issue of that people may take it, might not like, where 20,000 Haitians were just put in Springfield, Ohio, and some people might think that, how are we going to know all of a sudden when in the Harris administration, could 20,000 people just all of a sudden be in our country and in our city or our town? And is that going to drive up insurance? Is it going to drive up housing? Is that going to affect us? So it might have worked in one way, but maybe not the way he wanted. So we'll see.
I mean, at that point, one thing that makes me a little bit nervous about that statement itself is the fact now there's going to be a new stereotype for any of the Haitians that are going to be out there. It's going to be very detrimental to the immigrants, let alone any of the actual citizens of America. And that's going to be dangerous, if not very, very
It took me back to the China virus, how he called COVID. I was shocked. I said to myself, what is he doing? So it took me back to when COVID came, and he was calling it the China virus.
So across the board, no one thought that was appropriate.
Not okay.
No.
Not okay at all.
And then just transitioning from that to the comments about race, I don't know if you paid attention when the former president a couple of weeks back, questioned whether the vice president was black. But that discussion around race, how do you think each candidate handled that moment?
He handled it poorly. I mean, it shouldn't have been said in the first place. But as we've seen in 2016 and 2020, any news is good news to him, even if it's something awful that's said, because it gets him coverage, and less coverage is on Harris. So the way he tried to dance around that, he was like, I like whoever you are is fine. As okay. I mean, you should have said that in the first place.
I mean, it was to a point, though, because it was the moderator that did bring it up. Before Trump did. But at the same time, it's something that actually made me distrust Kamala initially, was due to the fact she is, or at least what she would constantly put forward is the fact that she is of Indian heritage, not black at all. And that's one thing that would bother me, is that as soon as she started going for the presidential debate, all of a sudden, now she's black. And that's going to grab a lot of black voters, yes. But it's whether or not, it's the flipping for me. And that's one thing that makes me very nervous. Because I remember the first time even Trump was being interviewed about it. And he ended up stating that he didn't know that she was black, that she was Indian. It was from a black reporter. And it was just due to the fact that the research wasn't done prior. Therefore, it was a really bad question. But then he got a really bad rep for, I guess, avoiding the fact of him, not answering whether or not her being black is going to be an issue or not, or where he stands on it.
But for particularly those of you who are people of color, did Did you take offense at all when he said, I don't know what she is?
From being friends with some very questionable people, that was very mild. No, I actually believe that he doesn't care what she is in general. It doesn't matter if she was black or white or a woman or male. I know for a fact he's definitely just competing in the debate to win. And yeah, I thought it was actually really weird that the moderator would even ask him that in the first place rather than an actual political question or a topic. So I think that was definitely a setup.
And she's Caribbean, right? Her father is Jamaican, I believe.
Yeah.
So she is Caribbean. Okay.
But she did, in her defense, she did grow up in a black neighborhood in Oakland. She did go to a black college, joined a black sorority. So she didn't just decide to be black when she was president.
Yeah.
She did, she identified as black all her life.
What was interesting is that throughout this whole thing, I thought she was going to say at some point, say weird, because they've been saying that a lot in the rallies. And I would think that she would call the response to him questioning her heritage as weird or trying to paint, supporters of Trump as weird. But I think she kind of realized that weird is kind of, the whole weird thing is such like an elementary school bully type of insult. Like they say, Trump, when Trump goes low, we go high. That's just bringing it down to his level. That was just, and so I think Kamala did a good job in terms of not saying it on the debate stage where people would see her saying that they're weird, because that would just, I think that would have put off a lot of people as well.
And then I know all of you more or less said that you, with the exception of you, Eddie, had seen the last debate back in June. So how would you compare this debate to the last debate with President Biden?
Both candidates were present. Last debate, Trump was present, Biden wasn't.
Yep, that's probably probably the same thing. I think
Most accurate thing.
Both were present.
Yes, that's
conscious, present.
So do you think it was the right move on the part of President Biden to step aside?
Absolutely.
It was.
He should be taking care of his grandbabies.
Yeah.
Yes.
He should have retired a long time ago.
It was, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place. Like if the debate didn't happen that early, he would still be. It would be too late for them to change course. Like
Absolutely.
Usually the debates don't happen that early, so the Democrats were lucky in that instance that it happened so early. But it just brings more questions of, they kept saying he was sharp, he was still there, but he
hasn't been sharp.
Yeah, so
let's say for years.
Yeah, so they've been hiding that. So I mean, that was something that also should have been brought up is the change, because Kamala didn't get a single vote during this primary. It was the Democratic primary was for Biden. So just to be installed in just because the polls weren't looking too good, that's kind of hypocritical, because they say Trump is a threat to democracy, but yet you went against the democracy because your polls weren't looking so good because Biden had a bad debate.
But should be remembered, the political parties are not the government. Political party can nominate anybody they want, anytime they want, for any reason they want.
Correct.
No, they're not held to any standard like that. If their candidate is obviously going to get clobbered in the election and you have time to change horses, they're perfectly
Might as well.
entitled to do that.
Is there anything that surprised you about this debate?
Well, earlier you asked, is there anything they didn't talk about? There is one thing they didn't talk about that surprised me, and it's one of my biggest, is the deficit and the national debt. It didn't come up at all. And that's been one of my biggest issues since the 70s. And it wasn't even mentioned. So I wish that had come up. Or if there's another debate, I wish that would come up.
That's true. That's a really important thing. Like people they only talk about the deficit during the debates, but it would be actually nice for them to actually get a budget surplus for once, which we haven't had since the Clinton administration.
Right.
So,
What else did you want to hear?
It's a lot more of less just stating the fact that they have plans and more of letting us know what the plans are.
I agree.
You're saying that,
Policies.
yeah, you keep on
More
saying you have plans and
details.
policies, but not explaining what your plan is. Because if your plan sucks, then do better.
Did you agree with the former president when he characterized the vice president's plan? He said it's as simple as see, spot, run. I think I saw a couple of you laugh in that moment.
He likes attention. What can I say?
Well,
He's an attention seeker.
It was out of pocket, unprofessional, but at the same time, that's Trump. So
I mean, did you think it was a good line? Was it accurate?
well, it got people to laugh,
He
and so
could have worded it differently, but I agree.
yeah, I mean, it's also how the results are for the past 3.5 years, and I think that's another reason why he was trying to shoot it down so aggressively. But it's been a little bit more of a struggle, and I mean, he did say that.
To me, he spoke facts. She's a politician. We all know what politicians do. She had the opportunity to make changes. She is the vice president. Nothing has been done. I'm really looking forward to see what's ahead.
I hope there's a second debate.
He used to be.
I wouldn't hold my breath, though.
I
really
don't hold my
looking
breath.
forward.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed.
But-
She hasn't done anything in 4 years, and she's not going to.
And then just finally, as we wrap up here, do you think there was enough fact-checking in this debate?
No,
No.
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 More so with, well, there wasn't any in the last debates, but that wasn't saying much because there was none. So there was a little. So they tried.
I would agree.
Well, let me just get your kind of final thoughts here. As you leave here tonight, did this debate change your mind in any way?
At the
No.
moment, a little bit. I have to do a little bit more research on Kamala's plans and see what she's really standing for, because a lot of politics is a lot of this debate is a lot of politics, and I know for a fact how Trump actually runs, and that's more action over debating and speaking,
Correct.
which can be a little detrimental when it comes to pleasing the public. But that's one thing that kind of makes me nervous. The fact I know for a fact, that's why I also said that Kamala won the debate, because she definitely pleases the masses for what she says. I have no evidence or experience with anything that she's actually done personally. So, yeah, that needs to be handled.
If there was any message I would give to independent and moderate voters or undecided, I would say go look at the archives of Kamala's stances back when she first ran in 2019 and compare it to now and see how she can so suddenly change so many positions so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen.
And for those of you who shook your head, no, this debate didn't change your mind, why?
I think that she still remains a strong candidate for me, and I think that he made a great point that you should research. You shouldn't just blindly trust. So I think that before everyone goes out to vote, you should definitely research and really pick the candidate that best fits your policies. But overall, I think she's a strong candidate.
This, if anything, it reinforced my opinion. He stood right up there on the stage and again denied that he lost the election last time around. That's tearing the country apart, and it's the refusal to go along with a peaceful transfer of power is the biggest threat to our country, far bigger than immigrants coming in or anything else. And he went up there and doubled down on it again. When it looked like he was finally admitting that he lost it the last 3 times in the last week, he went up and doubled down on it again. So if anything, it just reinforced it to me.
One quick follow-up, just because we're in Pennsylvania, and I know this was also a big issue in the debate, this issue of fracking, which I know is huge in Pennsylvania. We hear the vice president say time and again, I will not ban fracking, I will not ban fracking. Do you believe her?
Yes. As long as we need the oil or the gas, they're going to frack. That's just the economy, the way it is. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to wean ourselves away from fossil fuels, but we're not going to turn out the lights and move back into a cave. That's just not going to happen. We have to develop alternatives, whether that includes nuclear, solar, wind, and all of the above. But we have to do that. But nobody's turning off the lights, and nobody's advocating turning off the lights and moving back into the caves.
I think that Republicans, instead of denying climate change, should instead take a different stance. Instead of saying climate change doesn't exist, they should instead focus on energy independence and saying, look, solar and wind, they're nice, but it won't sustain us, and we're just going to be cutting. We'll just be taking more land for those energy, for that energy. So I think that if it were me, I would say Republicans should lean on more on a nuclear stance. Like, I know Pennsylvania kind of has a bad history with nuclear, but nuclear has advanced a lot since then, and nuclear is clean. It does not make any carbon emissions, and it will not only meet our energy needs now but also in the future, and also create jobs. So I think that instead of denying it, they should take a different stance and say, the Democrats, they might have these nice weak energy, but we like nuclear, and that's going to help make us energy independent.
All right. I know it's getting late, so I don't want to keep you any longer, but if just at this point, give me your closing thoughts as you walk out of the door here today. Kind of what are you taking away with you after tonight's debate?
I think it was a typical presidential debate, a lot of interrupting and everything, but I do think that they made some good points, and I think that it did give a lot of people a better decision and a better answer for who to vote for.
Do your research. Go vote. That's really it for me.
But you still need some time to make up your mind.
Oh, absolutely. I got to do my little cross my T's, dot my I's, and select who I actually think will actually do it. And also, if it happens to be the case that not be Trump, it's just making sure that I have faith in Kamala to be able to actually do it. Because if I don't have faith in her, then I'm going to have to go with Trump.
What am I taking away with me? The fact that they were, again, both present, and they both made some interesting points. However, I would have liked to see a lot more policies, and that wasn't discussed. So I would like another one.
But you still plan to vote for the former
I'm still
president?
voting
Okay. And you didn't the past two cycles, but
I
you
didn't.
will this time.
Will do.
What's changing for you on that?
Oh, the economy and the border control. Healthcare, economy, and border control. Absolutely.
I don't like Trump. I wish he wasn't the Republican nominee. But what Kamala was trying to show, I've said already, that she's just trying to play a moderate when she's not. So as much as I don't like Trump, he does bring up good points on the issues that matter, especially immigration. So,
But why hold your nose if you aren't feeling it?
well, because I don't think that we can allow Kamala to install the policies that she proposes secretly, like allowing the border to be open another 3.5 more years while saying it's secure, and then also while the economy, she's just going to throw money at it, which will just devalue the dollar, which has been devaluing since we went off the gold standard in the 70s. So as much as I don't like Trump, I think at least during the Trump presidencies, I wasn't able to tell a difference. But now during the Biden presidencies, I can definitely feel the difference in my wallet. And yeah, that's where I stand.
To clarify, I don't like his personality, but I do believe in what he stands for.
He might just be the right man for the job.
Correct.
Even though we might not like him. But he
Correct.
is.
Well, just the opposite. I'm reinforced in my belief that he is an existential threat to our democracy. He just the other day stood up and proudly proclaimed in front of all the cameras and the people that if he got elected, we'd never have to go vote again. This will be the last election. You'll never have to vote again. As he put it, I'll have things so fixed, you'll never have to vote again. He's not kidding. He means it. When was it Maya Angelou or somebody said, somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Mm-hmm. That's who he is. He loves every authoritarian dictator in the world, and he wants to be one. And this is a make or break election. If we elect him, it's over.
Make an extremely strong point.
First question, how would you rate this debate 1 to 10 when it comes to what you learned and having a better sense of where the candidates stand on issues? 1 to a 10?
10.
10.
Yeah. I give it a 6.
6?
6.
6?
8.
8?
I'd say 6.
6?
7.
Raise your hand if you were happy with the way your candidate performed. And I know you two are not sure or weren't sure before this started. Is everyone happy with how they're satisfied? Okay. For the two people who said before this debate started that they are not sure how they're going to vote, do you have a clear sense of who you'll probably vote for in this moment?
That's a tough one.
Still a tough one.
Because they both are good. They both are good, to me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Ellie?
I do have a better insight, I think.
Would you like to share?
Oh man. I think that I am more Republican leaning. It's really hard to put someone like former President Trump in the White House again, especially based on like January 6th actions and just his demeanor. He's a hard person, I think, to like.
Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Does Vance help him when it comes to people like you who are not impressed with the rhetoric, aren't happy with some of the comments made, but as you just stated, normally you're a Republican?
Yeah.
Normally you vote Republican?
Yeah.
Another quick question, show of hands, who thinks that Governor Tim Walz won this debate? Who thinks, okay, we got one. Yeah. Who thinks that Senator J.D. Vance won this debate? Really? So we have 4 people that believe J.D. Vance won this debate. Eric, what about you? You didn't raise your hand.
I didn't put a hand up because I felt like Tim Walz did a better job of like answering the questions like fully with like actual data points. I feel like J.D. did a good dance of like controlling some of the narrative and like hitting on some of his talking points again. And I think he did like a great presentation. So I think it kind of depends on what you were looking for.
Was this one of the more civil discussions that you've seen in a while?
Yes.
And how did it make you all feel? And I'll start with you, Ellie.
It made me feel better about a decision of going farther Republican, but it made me happy to see that it was more tame.
Max?
From someone who very vividly remembers Trump and Biden's first debate in 2020 and what a mess that was of back and forth. I was happy to see that on both the presidential and vice presidential debates that they were way more civil.
Christina?
Well, I believe this debate that I saw made me happy that, again, the politics is going back to us treating each other with respect. And all the rhetoric, that horrible rhetoric, was not in this one tonight. Mm-hmm. It made me very happy.
And Holly?
Yeah, I agree. I liked how it went. I thought that they both complimented each other when they needed to and gave respect to each other when they deserved it too for the comments that they gave. And I just thought that it flowed really well and that they got along as 2 gentlemen, I felt like.
Eric?
Yeah, no, I really appreciated that. I thought that was great to see, and I'm glad that both sides like stepped up and did that.
Yeah, I'm glad to see they both got along very well.
Yeah.
You know, there was no fighting and no bickering and all that.
Were
I
you
thought it was
were you
good.
expecting that though with these two?
I was.
You were
Yeah.
expecting some
Sure,
bickering.
a little
or-
bit, you know.
There was that part where they had to mute the mics, and we all kind of chuckled. I want to go to you, Max, because I was watching you throughout, and I think you were the most expressive. When J.D. Vance, and not that you weren't like doing anything out of the ordinary, but when I was looking at you, I noticed you would nod your head when J.D. Vance was speaking, particularly opening up about his background, about coming from, his roots and a drug-addicted mother and, getting into an Ivy League school and all of that. What is it about him and what you heard from him tonight that really strikes you as this is my guy and this is why I'm voting, on the Trump Vance ticket?
I think that my biggest takeaway from Vance is that he is able to articulate himself, his feelings, his policies in a respectful way, whereas it balances him and his counterpart, or him and his running mate, as he said, right? It's one of the things that I dislike about Trump, even though I'm planning to vote for him, is the personal attacks. I feel that they're just not necessary. But I just feel like Vance is very well spoken. He has clearly done his homework in the things that he talks about, and as they both said, they're going to misspeak. And that's human nature. I don't fault either one of them for it. But I do feel that he answers the questions for the most part as politicians do, and when somebody else doesn't, he calls them to task on it, as he did to Walz on the Tiananmen Square issue, and never did we get a clear answer out of that entire rebuttal, and even him saying, "You can answer the question," and he didn't do it. I feel that that's weak.
Christina, you look like you wanted to say something, and there were times I was looking at you specifically when they were talking about the immigration bill,
Right.
and how that was something that was supported by conservative, but it didn't get passed.
Right, and I do remember that happening when that happened. I was really disappointed. It's like, this is a really good bill that they all seem to agree upon, the Republicans and the Democrats, to stop the craziness down at the border. Trump stands up and says no, and it doesn't pass. It's like, wait a minute, he's not even running our country. What's he doing, So it did kind of that right there. But the immigration, I understand, is a big thing. It's just, they just have to figure out how to get it under control,
Were you all surprised at all at the number of times where it felt like they both acknowledged how they agreed on issues, and even if it was something small, like, talking about the devastation from the storm, and saying, I think we both agree, our hearts break for people who are in the community. But specifically, the housing crisis, they acknowledge that they're on the same page with some things. And then when they talked about the transition of power, Vance said that if he'll have my help, if he wants it. If you guys don't mind just talking to us about what that was like to see candidates on opposite sides of the spectrum agree on certain things and be able to sort of move on.
That's the way it should be. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely pleasantly surprised to see them reaching out to just point out those connections. I will say on the Tiananmen Square thing, he did answer the question poorly, but he answered it. He said he got there later in that summer, and he could have answered that question more clearly. You were talking about the immigration bill, and I would have loved to see that passed as well. I felt like I saw a lot of rhetoric, and I don't know how that's going to come true, because at the end of the day, Trump is the candidate. Trump has made very clear how he treats people that are loyal to him or disloyal to him. So I think J.D. Vance can say that and maybe mean that. But if Trump gets elected or doesn't get elected, if we do have another situation like January 6th again, J.D. Vance isn't going to have any influence over what that looks like. So that's why it's I think it sounded good on stage, but there's no track record to back up that that's how those two people are going to behave if they're put in that situation.
In reference to just the amount of times that they agreed
Oh,
on
yes.
different policies, not all the way, but just this sort of mutual respect where there was a recognition of, I think he does want better policies, or I think we do share similar views on some of this stuff.
It was shocking because I didn't expect it, and it just made me realize how much they're alike, but I think that they just have different ways of going about things, and so that's where we have the conflict. But it seemed that they agreed on so many things together, and mutually about things.
Overall, and we can start with you, Bill, what were your big takeaways after watching this debate? I know you said you're still undecided, but what were the big takeaways for you?
Well, I don't know. I guess they're both smooth talkers,
It's called politics.
I give them credit, but that's probably mine. It's
Smooth talkers. Did you learn anything in detail about a policy or stance that you didn't know before?
No, not really, but they were both close on everything. They
felt close to you on pretty much all the
yeah,
issues.
And I'm glad, I'm glad about that. They finally, we got to get along.
So
whether you're Democrat or Republican, get along.
As someone who is undecided then, do you think the country will be okay no matter who wins after seeing the two of them?
Wow. I hope we're going to be okay, put it that way. I can't really say. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Very tough one.
Eric, what about you? What were your big takeaways after watching this?
I feel a lot more excited about the Harris-Walz economy plan, and I know the economy is important to all of us. I remember 2019 before the pandemic, and I remember the stock market doing well, but I still remember just as many, if not more, people that were struggling to pay rent or save up for a house or other things like that. So when I hear about some of the initiatives around helping small businesses, I'm a small business owner. When I hear about these credits to buy houses or help families, those things I think are going to help the middle class. I think those things are important, and I didn't learn anything today from J.D. Vance or those tax policies on the Republican side that are actually going to help really everyday people. So I felt that I learned a bit more about more confidence with the Harris-Walz plan on the economy, and I feel excited about that.
Holly, what about you? When you hear someone like Eric say there was no specificity about how J.D. Vance, how Donald Trump's policies would help the middle class, what do you say to that, or what are you thinking after watching that debate?
I don't really think that Donald Trump needs to prove it again because he already proved it before. So I don't think that's even relevant at this point. In regards to learning things, I really didn't know much about either of them other than seeing their pictures. So I didn't even know how they carried themselves, held themselves, spoke, anything. So for me, that was really eye-opening to see J.D. Vance, like you said, he's very articulate. I think he can hold himself very well and keep his composure. So I was very surprised on that because I really haven't seen too much of him, speaking and things like that in that light.
Biggest takeaway?
I like him as a VP. I do. I think I like the way that he carries himself.
Christina?
I was very sad on January 6th to see what happened to our country 4 years ago when Biden won, and I don't want to see that happen again. And I don't know if Trump doesn't win how it's going to play out, and it kind of scares me. Because some of not all his followers, but some of his followers are very, I don't even, they're so blinded that they can't see anything else. And for him, even to this day, in my opinion, to say he won that election is just makes me worry about his brain.
Whose brain?
Trump. He's saying he's never admitted to losing the election in the last election.
And how about how Senator Vance answered that question?
If he's going to if Pence hadn't done what he did on January 6th, I don't know what would have happened to our country. But it's going to scare me if we're going to have the same thing. And, well, no, the Vice President would be Kamala that would do that, right? So, no, I guess we'd be okay. I know, I'm trying to figure that out in my brain. But I've never worried about our voting being compromised, and it kind of was a shocker to think about that, you know, that other countries would come in and mess with us like that. But I guess that's reality.
Max, the biggest takeaway for you after watching tonight?
So the 3 points that I talked about originally was, you know, the economy, and as you said, there are 4 years to show. We don't need to rehash it out. We already know we're going to go back to essentially that with whatever can be secured through Congress and the Senate. We always have to remember that the president doesn't just push a button and change everything. You know, it doesn't, that power is not there. So the economy is there. Spoke about briefly on, you know, foreign policy and, you know, not being the world police, you know, as South Park loved to, you know, clarify in their movie. We don't need to be that, and there is a lot that I like that he said that, you know, what do you say, the strength of power, or whatever it was, how he phrased it. The last 4 years has shown that that has not been there. In the prior before that, people didn't like it. Other world leaders didn't necessarily like his gruffness, his going on Twitter and going on rants, his personal attacks and all that. But he checked the other world powers that were dangerous. And whether it be Putin, whether it be North Korea and China, things didn't happen under his watch like they have over the last 4 years. Ukraine, for example, even the Israel, you know, Iran-backed Hezbollah stuff. He has a way of checking other world powers, so they understand and they respect the United States, and they're not going to do things that are going to draw our ire either directly or through our allies. But finally, the most important is the immigration. We heard about that and how it's affecting all of our cities, how all these people are being displaced. And people do need to understand that there is a legal way to do it. All for that. That's, you know, what America is all about, right? But it has to be a legal and structured way of doing it. And people should believe that, hey, if I go to another country, whichever one I wanted to around the world, and I just expect to be let in, and, you know, I'm told no, or it's not necessarily the way the law states, I shouldn't be able to just get in. Now, I understand people apply for asylum. They do things legally. That's the way it needs to be done. We are in a mess right now because there's influxes in Michigan, in our area, and in other large cities. And all of these kids are displaced. And in the greater Grand Rapids area, they fall to the foster care system. So these other entities, nonprofits that basically essentially run that through licensing, they're responsible for trying to find housing for these kids, whether it's in group homes or through actual foster homes. These kids who are now falling into, you know, the term of misguided youth are getting into trouble. They are, the only culture they know is the one from back home, and things don't work that way in the United States under our laws. And then they wind up getting in trouble, either, you know, victimizing others and operating in a way that they were perceived was okay back home or back where they originated from, and it's not okay here.
Have you seen some of this personally too? You talking about your role in law enforcement?
Yes, and that's where I can really speak to it. And I like they said, I feel terrible that people will come here that are not here legally, then they have children here who are then American citizens, and then what do you do with that, right? That's a mess. I don't have an answer for that. But what I do see happen is other cultures come here and are undocumented, and I can state in the last year and a half, over 70-75% of some of the people that have already gone through the criminal justice system on cases that I worked were undocumented migrants. And my investigations are family related, so either child abuse and neglect or sex offenses.
So this is personal for you?
Yeah, it's my personal, it's my professional observation. Yeah. And the other issue there is they don't necessarily, because they're not here, they're not documented. They don't have documented criminal histories. So then in the state of Michigan, the sentencing guidelines are really low. So you see crimes that in your opinion are heinous and would be heinous, you know, to here are getting very minimal sentences.
I saw you shaking your head immediately when Senator Vance talked about first starting with the criminals. You were, you know, clearly supportive of that. Christina it seemed like it was making sense to you as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Criminals definitely, if you're here illegally and you're a criminal, I believe you should be deported and not let back in. Unfortunately, they keep coming back in, and that's the hard part. But yeah, I totally agree with that.
And Eric, again, I know you're planning to vote for the Harris-Walz ticket. You seemingly feel the same way.
Yeah. I think if people, one, came to this country illegally and they are committing crimes, I think they should absolutely, be deported. I think it is a messy situation to figure out how to do that with families, but I think all of us want this country to be safe. I definitely consider myself pro-immigration, but I want to see those people come through, legally and go through the system.
And Ellie, your takeaways, because I know we're getting all the way around the room. I want to make sure I ask you, what was something that really sort of stuck out? And it sounds like the economy and immigration for everyone here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is still high up in terms of priority.
And abortion.
And abortion. Okay.
Yeah, my three were economy, abortion rights, and then also gun control. And I feel like I feel like on gun control, they both agreed that that something needed to be done, but there really wasn't a plan to fix anything. The only thing that I heard was Vance saying that he wanted more security in the schools.
How do you feel about that, especially having two young children?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the security, but I think that they also talked about a mental health crisis and that being an impact, and I think there should be focus on that in the schools as well. I appreciate if someone were to have access to a gun in my kid's school, I have no idea what I would do. And if there was a security officer there that would be able to eliminate that threat and eliminate the situation, then I certainly want that.
Yeah, I do think there was kind of like an unfair drawback during the debate where they tried to draw in like some of the illegal migrants and those guns, talking about that with school shootings. To my memory, like none of the school shootings were related to like situations like migrants bringing in illegal weapons, but you talk about like the enhanced background checks and some of these things, like, I guess I can say I'm a gun owner too. I was like, do I really want to share that? But it's like, I believe in some of these things when they talk about like, can we do enhanced background checks? Can we do mental health checks on people that are purchasing guns, and like holding parents accountable if they're like giving access to guns to kids? I mean, those things need to be looked at. And that's, I think, a very important reality to talk about is like when these school shootings are happening, like who are the kids that are perpetrating these and what are the situations that they're having at home?
Michigan is the state that prosecuted the parents.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, that put them away for 10 years.
Right.
But that was kind of a unique situation. I think the parents were a little bit more involved in what he was doing and handed him the gun and stuff. I mean, I don't believe all parents, but I think in this situation it was quite a unique.
Yeah, that was a landmark case,
Yes,
I think.
it was, in the country.
Help us understand what happened in that debate that made you go, you know what, I think I'm definitely going to go for Trump and Vance on this one. Was there a moment?
I don't think I was convinced just through the abortion argument to go Trump-Vance. There were other factors like gun control and the economy and immigration, foreign policy that made me sway that way. Abortion is definitely still a strong topic, but there were other factors, and unfortunately not one person has the same opinions, all the same opinions that I do.
And how much of hearing from J.D. Vance made you more comfortable with a decision to now support that ticket?
Him just saying pro-family was really what had me. And he seemed not to have such a hard stance on no abortion at all.
Since we're on the topic of reproductive rights, Max, how did you feel when you heard both candidates discussing it?
It's hard for me because we needed some fertility assistance with our youngest son, right? I think that what happens is people get polarized when they hear the topic abortion or Roe v. Wade. It's about more than just abortion. It draws in all the fertility, I guess we'll call them rights, the right to birth control if you want it, and some of those things do get jammed up in this gray area that we find ourselves in. Now, I will say that I do believe, and it's not necessarily a popular opinion depending on who it is. But I do believe that our country was founded that there are some things left to the states. This was one of them. Trump specifically said that very clearly in the presidential debate. This is something that used to be at the states level, and it's been so long that people believe that it falls to the federal level. Now, abortion, again, people get polarized. They think, oh, well, abortion, whenever a woman, right, well, women's rights are important. Doctors are not going to, say, well, essentially, if you're going to lose your life, well, you're going to die then, right? These people that Walz talked about that traveled states to get medical care, they didn't die because a doctor said, I'm not going to help you, right? Like, that's not my understanding and my takeaway from that. But I do feel that, the pro-family thing that he talked about, that was very well received. That was very important because a lot of times people it's a black and white, only one or the other, and it's only abortion. The rest of all of that is not drawn into the equation.
A quick show of hands when he said the name Amber Thurman. How many of you all were familiar with that story? 3? So Amber Thurman is who he was referring to, who left Georgia, drove to North Carolina to have a surgical abortion. She couldn't have the surgical abortion because she was late. So someone said at the office, why don't you take these abortion pills? So the first one she took while she was at the office, she drove back to Georgia, and within days of taking the second pill, she started having severe pain. Her boyfriend called 911. She went to the hospital, and they went in to perform a D&C, which is to remove the remains of the fetal, stuff from the uterus, but they did it 20 hours after she was admitted. And when he said Amber Thurman would have been alive and if it happened in Minnesota, I think no one knows with certainty, but it's this idea of the lengths that someone's going to, because in that state, at that time, 9 weeks is too late. All that said, when I guess, as you said, it's sort of complicated. It's not just about abortion, and it becomes a heated topic for a lot of people, and it's a personal issue, obviously. But when you hear sort of that type of a story, does it change your perspective or take, or do you feel like it's not something that you typically weigh in on anyway?
And I think, and I'm glad you asked that, because I would definitely want to clarify on something. When Roe v. Wade goes away and it goes back to the states, there's going to be a transition time, so to speak, for people to figure out, okay, so who of our lawmakers are going to do right by women's rights, so to speak, women's choices. And unfortunately, in doing that, things like this are going to happen, and that is tragic. As both of the candidates would agree, both those incidents for Thurman and the other one that they spoke about are tragic. And when it's taken back to the state's level, people are going to have to determine, because you don't want to say, well, fine, just don't live in that state, right? People don't have that. Not everybody has that option. That's not fair. But what they can do is determine, okay, so now we need to look and see who are our lawmakers and what is their standpoint. And if they aren't going to be for women's rights, then you find the ones that are, and you elect those.
And if I could clarify, ProPublica broke that story. They broke it because there was a committee that reviewed Amber Thurman's records and determined that her death, there's a good chance it was preventable if that D&C had been done earlier. But the question is, why was it 20 hours? We don't know, because no one was able to speak to the doctors. But the theory is because of other doctors in these states that have more restrictive abortion bans, are the ideas of questions about, are we allowed to? Should we wait? Could I be prosecuted? And I think, to your point about working out some of those kinks about, well, what does this now mean in said state? Because there's no universal, this is legal up to this point. Christine, I want to give you a chance to comment. You have 5 boys.
Yes.
You talked before we went on television about how hard it is probably for people to raise that amount of children today.
Yes.
The cost associated with raising children. When it comes to reproductive rights, where do you stand, and what did you make of what both candidates had to say?
Well, I believe it's a woman's decision. It's a private decision. I believe in it. I've never had one, and I never would. But I do believe a woman has a right to make her own decision. You know, and I'm not here to judge anybody. I saw a report on TV, and I don't know if it was a 20/20 or 48 hour, but it was one of those two, because I watch those all the time. And it was about, I think there were like 4 or 5 or maybe 6 different women that had run into issues in their state with abortions and stuff. And it was all their stories, and boy, it was really, really sad. Where they had to leave the state, and there was one woman that, I don't remember the stories, but all of them were very, very sad how it affected them because they weren't able to get the medical attention they needed in their state.
Holly, if you don't mind, just.
Yeah, I'm pro-choice, pro-family, I guess you could say. I think it's every person's choice, you know, every woman's choice as to what they want to do with their body. I think it's, you know, something that everybody should have that option to do if they need to. Yeah.
Okay. I want to get Bill back into this conversation a little bit. Bill, when they were talking about healthcare and this idea that concepts and plans may not be enough to help the American voter understand what that means regarding pre-existing conditions, how important is the topic of healthcare to you? And did you find yourself learning anything from the candidates that you didn't already know?
No, I have, excuse me, I have good health insurance, you know, being retired, and so I don't really have to worry about that. So I'm glad about that. And I feel sorry for people that don't have insurance because you could lose everything by one visit to the hospital. You're done.
I want to press you a little bit on this idea that you don't know who you're going to vote for, because we're like about a month away, and you voted for the first time in your life in 2016.
Correct.
You didn't vote in 2020 because you just said, I'm not happy with the guy that I chose, which was former President Donald Trump. If the election was tomorrow, who are you most likely to vote for?
I'd have to say Trump. I really would. I mean, I like J.D. Vance. He was pretty good. Like I said, he was smooth talking. And it was just, to me, it was better with Trump, you know, when I voted.
When you say better with,
you know, the economy
Trump.
was better. You know, wasn't that much crime. There wasn't all these wars that were, you know, breaking out now. It just seemed different.
He still had a lot of shootings, though, when he was in president. He had shootings in the schools and stuff.
Oh, I understand that, you know, but I mean, you peel everything back and, you know, you weigh it up. You know, that's your decision. But mine is, I think it was better, you know, when he was president. That's all I can say.
Eric?
What's the question?
Just asking for a response as you listen, and we're now down to we have 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 6. We started out a little different.
Yeah, no,
but now we have 4 people that are sitting here who are saying, you know what, I'm going to go with Trump, and you two are in the minority group.
It scares me.
That scares you.
It does. It
Why?
scares me a lot because I just don't like his rhetoric. I don't believe anything he says. Anything he says really just is, and everything they've proven time and time again what he has said is lies, and he still, you know, that kind of scares me. It scares me that he's going to run our country again.
Yeah, I mean, I am someone that looks a lot at history. I am a nerd by a lot of standards, and I just understand that a lot of these things like do take time. So when people talk about the economy, I feel like I probably understand that like pretty well. And I just didn't see the things that Trump was doing that again was like helping people. I mean, when I really think back to that time frame, like I still remember people struggling. Like the stock market was doing great. So if you had money in the stock market and you were pulling money like off of that, I could see why people would say that. But it's
Do you all have money in the stock market?
No, I don't.
Like I don't.
But you all are homeowners.
I mean, not necessarily stock market, but I'm assuming you also talk about like in
401k.
Correct.
401ks,
Yeah.
yes. So towards retirement investments, yes.
Does everybody here have some level of, I mean, you just said you're retired,
Right.
you're good,
Yeah.
living your best life.
You know, I'm living my best life, yeah.
But do you all
It's
just
all
remember
good. Put
people
it
like
that way. It's
wasn't
all good.
struggling in 2019? Like, do you remember just like everything was rainbow and sunshines?
I will say I do feel like my grocery bills were a lot lower, and I do feel like gas was lower. So I do feel like that impacted a bit. Yeah.
Can I speak on one of these topics?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I heard, the housing market I remember it was hard to compete to buy a house. Building was, I mean, we built because that was way easier than trying to mess with that market. And I heard, this was the first time I heard it, was Governor Walz speaking about the credits that the party was going to provide, the $25,000 down payment, and then it was $5,000 or $10,000 tax credit, correct me if I'm wrong. And that scares me. I remember all of the excess, the COVID money, or whatever they called the COVID payments we all got, right? I knew I was gonna wind up paying that back at some point in time. Sure enough, those go away, and then I have a child all of a sudden that I'm claiming again, and boom, I got hit, right? And then inflation tax on right after that. You start handing out $25,000 for down payments. That sounds awesome. For people that are going to get that, and we don't know what the qualifiers are, right? So we don't know. So let's just take it at face value, 25 grand. Okay, for a down payment. Unless with the cost of homes now, I don't know how you would be able to buy a suitable house, let's just say in the Grand Rapids area, and have that $25,000 bail you out enough to avoid having to pay PMI. You're not going to get 20% down out of that, right? So you're still going to be paying PMI, which is expensive. You're going to give that to people that qualify, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that the people that qualify, it's going to be for lower income families. And in doing that, you put people in a precarious situation like we saw in 2008 with the mortgages. You're going to give them a window of hope to get a house. They're going to go to a bank and qualify because of the government assistance. And what if they don't have the means to maintain that? Even though they are able to get in, but then they don't have the means or the financial discipline to maintain that loan, and then subsequently they lose that house. That money that came from wherever they're going to get it from, ultimately, potentially, we wind up leveraging, our children and grandchildren's futures to pay for something. That's a lot of money to give out to a lot of people. That's way more than was provided on the tax credits per kids.
And if I can, just to clarify, everyone sitting here is a homeowner.
Yes.
So you all have sort of a unique perspective of what it takes to get into a home, what it takes to maintain a home. Your concern is that's not really the plan that's going to help the country and people who are looking for housing. You recognize there is a crisis, though.
That is a poisonous lure to give to people that are hoping to be able to get into a house, because
The $25,000.
the 25,000.
incentive.
Yep. Let's not even talk about how it's going to be, where it's going to come from, right? Let's just talk about doing that to people. That's victimizing people who already feel victimized by the system that we live in.
Christina, do you feel like it could actually be helpful?
I was in mortgages in 08 and 09. I was a mortgage loan originator. That's what I did for 20 years. And the program that I know here in the state of Michigan is a little bit different. We have a down payment assistance program, and you're given money, but when you go to sell your house and you go to refinance, you got to pay that money back. It's not yours to keep. You got to pay it back eventually. Right. They don't charge you any interest. You don't have to pay it, but when you sell or refi, you got to give the state back the money.
Holly, how did it work out for you?
It worked out great, except I refinanced my house and I had to pay it all back. But they give you 3% down, 1% down. They pay your prepaids and your closing costs. That's all you get. So it's not like a lump.
There's a different program. So
Yeah, it could be different, but that's what it was for me. So I had to bring like $200 to close. But I mean, my house was a lot cheaper.
Right.
But I only got like $4 or $5 grand. I didn't get like 35 grand.
Right, there's a city of Grand Rapids down payment. There's a state of Michigan, MSHDA. So we have a couple. There's a couple of programs here in the state that we use.
So when you hear the federal government wants to help with programs that have already been in place in some states, like here in Michigan, Do you see that as a good thing or something that would actually put people in a bad situation
Well, I
years
guess
later?
I would agree with what he's saying. I guess it all depends on where the money's coming from, and do they have to pay it back eventually? Because I think that's what they said on TV, was that a program where eventually you'll have to pay it back.
And then what happens if you default on that loan and you foreclose on that house, and then, I mean, are they just going to forgive that $25,000? I don't think so. I think that then your credit, in the way our system works, is going to tank, force you to file for bankruptcy, and then
Tanks anyways if you're going to
exactly,
file
right?
foreclosures. It doesn't matter.
Then you're setting people up to have a terrible credit history for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I don't see that happening a lot in Michigan. A lot of the stories that I hear are more like your story, where people do get the help and then they do own a house, and everybody doesn't take it. I know a lot of people who are renters who are in this boat that you're talking about, where they aren't interested in taking that jump. But I know a lot of people who have been saving $10,000, $15,000 to try to buy a house that haven't been able to do it.
Right.
So I think there are a lot more people with home prices going up, as we've all talked about, where that $20,000, $30,000 could actually help them
With what maybe they've already saved?
with money they've already saved, because they're going to have to do that to some extent to take a step out of poverty. I think you have a perspective and maybe a friend group that you've seen experience things, but I've seen a lot of people that are really trying to save up that amount of money, that would love to buy a house, that would take care of it and build that equity, to just like haven't had that opportunity.
But let's face it, that's not who they're going to focus on.
Okay. So, Bill.
Yes.
My guy.
All right.
What did you make of the Harris-Walz plan when it comes to the housing market?
Well, you know, I feel bad for people that have to buy a house nowadays. They're so expensive. And half the time, you know, you got people with a lot of cash that come in there and buy them anyway before you get them, and then they'll sell them again and double their money. And $25,000 ain't gonna do that.
You say $25,000 ain't going to do
Ain't gonna
nothing.
help.
Yeah.
They're just too expensive.
So do you
Way too
do you think there's a better way to handle that?
Well,
because you heard Senator Vance talk about looking at federal land to create more space for more housing, and there aren't as many places, at least on this side of the country, that have just a bunch of federal land that could be used perhaps for helping the housing crisis.
but now you build new housing, new homes, and they're going to be even more expensive than the homes that are out there. To me, anyway. I mean, it's a crisis, no doubt. When I bought my home, I was lucky to get it just in time before they started raising the price. And I was lucky to refinance it just in time before the interest rates went up.
Right.
So I was pretty fortunate, for that. That's a tough issue.
Yeah.
It's just way out of line.
Yeah.
And you have the banks that own a lot of them, but they won't release them. They'll hold on to them and maybe let one go, and then, just to keep the prices up and all that.
Yeah.
It's all about the dollar.
Could I just say something on that too?
Absolutely.
I've heard that a lot of investors are coming in and purchasing homes too, and then they rent them out, and of course then they jack the rent prices up. I mean, right now a 1-bedroom, 1-bath across from me is going for $1,900 a month.
Oh my.
That they're brand new, granted, but $1,900 a month.
That's a lot of money.
For a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. So
Yeah.
that's not affordable.
No, it's not for most people, especially that small amount of space. Early on, we heard our moderators come out of the gate really talking about what we saw today. How many of you all were watching some of the live coverage when Iranian ballistic missiles were hitting Tel Aviv? Raise your hand if you saw some of that coverage.
Saw some of it.
You saw some of the coverage. As our moderators noted, the Middle East is on the brink of war. How much of the issues happening right now in the Middle East keep you up at night? Do you think about it? Is it something that plays into who you're going to vote for when you think about who could be leading our country as this war and others continue?
I think war is very complicated, you know, and I believe, if I remember correctly, that Israel and they've been fighting war since the biblical times, you know, and as far as anybody being able to come in and just solve that kind of problem, I don't know. I do believe that a lot of the countries, which I think I heard you say, depend on us way too much, you know.
You say too many countries depend on us?
Yeah, financial, we give them a lot of financial aid.
That the U.S. gives a lot of financial aid to these other countries?
Yeah.
Do you think it needs to stop? Do you see it as an interest, in our best interest when we're giving aid to other countries?
I don't know how much we should be involved, I guess, I don't know.
We have NATO for a reason. We are not to be world police. And it's time and time again, history continues to repeat itself in the Middle East and, you know, in Eastern Europe, that we get pulled into these situations and we are just dumping money into those countries, and our own people are like, what's going on here? We have our own problems. And that's why I stated, you know, at the beginning that we need to tighten our belt and shore up our own interests at home internally before we have any business shelling the kind of money we do to foreign nations.
They said it.
I do. I also fear about like a potential World War III, like I mentioned earlier, and what that would do to our home, our kids, if they're going to have to, you know, who knows, start preparing for a war. That's terrifying.
Holly, you said it does keep you up at night.
Well, what I was going to say is I heard it's like $300 million a day that we're paying for that war right now over there.
Which one?
The Israel one that we're supplying and helping out over there. And like, that's just astronomical to me to even think of that amount every day being sent somewhere when we have so many people here that need that help and that we're not helping.
Eric, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that war sucks. I think that we should definitely not be spending as much money on it as we does. I think that having that money and those resources go to issues at home would be extremely important. I think that in some instances, like the war that's going on now, I think those wars were planned like a long time ago. Like if you look at the history of like Russia and the stuff that's going on in China right now, like a lot of these things have been in play for a long time, and it sucks that it's happening now.
Is it important for us to be involved? I mean, specifically in the Middle East, because of the interest that we have, because of the support that we continue to show, whether it is in Israel, whether it is in Ukraine?
Yeah, we got to help.
You said we got to help?
Yeah, we should help them, you know, if we can. But, you know, it's a lot of money, and that's what it's all about. It's all money.
When it comes to gun violence, I want to kind of go back to that topic because mass shootings were addressed, the number of guns that we have. Senator Vance talked about the immigration policies and sort of linking it to the illegal guns coming into this country. But the reality of it is there have been for quite some time, more guns in this country than people. Is there a solution as you see it? You all have children. Many of us did not grow up with mass shootings being a regular occurrence. It's on the news, it's on social media, the images, the pictures, the letters people leave. Is it an issue for you, and what did you take away from tonight's debate when it comes to gun violence?
I do feel it's an issue for me on the level of a lot of, again, the focus is on, well, we need to ban guns, or, or assault rifles, or, do these things to take them away. Where this really falls is on the family and the community. It's that, it takes a village. Well, with firearms in general, not just, assault rifles, it's all about responsible ownership. And what happens is that doesn't get the spotlight and it needs to. It's not only, the laws, because as we all know, people are going to get a hold of guns whether it's legal or not. It's going to happen. The majority, I believe that the majority aren't necessarily coming in from, through illegal immigration. I feel that it's irresponsible gun ownership in America, leaving your guns in your vehicles, allowing access to them to your children's friends, not basically practicing responsible gun ownership, leaving them, you know, making sure they're locked up. Educating kids on, hey, if you come across a gun, what do you do, right? In my family, growing up, you know, I grew up several generations of, you know, proud gun owners and hunting and all that, and if I had walked across and actually found a gun that was laying out, I wouldn't touch it. I would go get an adult and a parent, and teaching kids to do that is important. And also, like we saw with the Landmark case, if parents are involved in irresponsible gun ownership and their children get a hold of it and, you know, create havoc, victimize others, those parents share in that responsibility. Just as they would if they, you know, neglect their children's environment and, you know, they're malnourished or they don't have the support systems they need. Firearms is the same way. You allow those out there, parents let their kids get them, and then crimes get committed, you know, all these school shootings happen.
A lot of those school shootings that have happened involved AR-15 style weapons. Do you think there should be, is there a time to have a conversation about the access that people have to those types of weapons?
And this is something too that falls to the states, and the states need to be tougher on it. Here locally in the West Michigan area, getting caught with a concealed weapon essentially, or let's say we'll use a handgun for example, is a felony. And yet government is not, or our criminal justice system is not tough on that, and you can get arrested for, it's called CCW, carrying a concealed weapon, go to jail and get out literally the next day on a personal recognizance bond, which means they'll assign you an amount, but they're going to let you right out. And this will happen time and time again, which is a problem. So we don't treat it strongly enough on the criminal justice side. As a society, we don't, from the parents to you know, law enforcement to communities, get together and stress, hey, we need to educate, and through the education we can prevent a lot of this from happening. And then with the assault rifles, so people may or may not realize this, but handguns now, especially like Glocks or others, they make what they call a switch for it, and it turns it into a fully auto gun. So you get an extended mag. You have more rounds. You have more rounds in that extended mag on a handgun than you do on an assault rifle. The reason people die from assault rifles is because the round, the velocity is such that, this is a little technical, but when you get shot with, like, let's say a .223 or an assault rifle, which is the caliber that they're using, your body can't, it expands your tissues more than they can contract. So with a handgun, that doesn't happen because it's lower velocity. With rifles, it does, and that's what causes that trauma, and people die from that a lot more.
The thing that's interesting to me is, like, I'm just listening to both of y'all, like, really all of you all talk about some of these different policies, and, like, Democrats have been, and I was originally a Republican. Like, I started out Republican. I could just not get on the Trump bandwagon. So here we are today. But it's like, Democrats have been trying to pass, like, you know, enhanced background checks, like some of these gun safety laws for a long time now, and it just keeps getting, like, pushed down from different folks in the Republican Party. So it's great that, like, we're getting here and, like, we're saying that this is important, but, like, at the end of the day, you all are deciding to support, like, this party that has been moving in this direction that is, like, opposite of some of the things that you were saying is important.
How so specifically?
Well, specifically, like, with the shootings in the school, it's like we've been trying to get, from what I've been watching in Congress, it's been coming up for decades now, about trying to get some of these just basic enhanced background checks passed. I got asked more questions when I was getting a dog from the shelter than when I was getting my gun. So it's like, you know, just looking at that issue, it's like we've been talking about that for a long time, and we're just now getting to a point where it seems like maybe there's going to be, like, actually, like, real support on both sides to do, like, basic gun safety things. But I feel like the Republican Party has not prioritized or taken, like, some of these basic common sense gun things, like, seriously.
Yeah, my thought process on it is if you purchase a firearm, right, easy to do unless you have some kind of record that prevents it, and then you practice irresponsible gun ownership, you leave that thing in your car unlocked, it gets stolen, used in a crime, at that point, yeah, you should be penalized for that, as far as being able to, maybe you don't get criminally charged for it, but you go on a list somewhere where maybe your right to purchase is suspended for a period of time, you know, and that's something that, unfortunately, with especially when Second Amendment comes in, is hard even for Republicans to stomach. But at some point, there needs to be a check and balance for it, and the thought process is as a community, we need to hold each other accountable to responsible. Gun ownership's going to happen, right? But it needs to be responsible, and those that choose not to, well, you might potentially for a while lose your privilege.
Really quickly, I want to ask you guys each a quick question. Is democracy on the line in this election? Bill?
Yes, sure is.
Eric, why are you laughing?
Because it just absolutely is, and I had to catch myself. But it's like, oh my God, is it? Yeah.
Hollis?
Same. I feel the same way. Yes.
Yes, definitely.
More than ever in my life, yes.
More than ever in your life?
Yes.
Kelly? Yes. I know you said you're concerned about another January 6th or worse. Do you all want to hear from the folks at the top of the ticket? Would you want to hear from Harris and Trump one more time? Or are you convinced, you know who you're voting for, it doesn't matter at this point moving forward? Bill?
I'd like to hear it one more time.
One more time.
Sure.
I want them to hear who they're voting for, so absolutely do one more.
I really don't want to.
No, you're good.
I'm done. I'm over it.
I'd like to see one more debate.
One more debate?
I'd go for it, yeah.
One more debate?
Yeah. It wouldn't change my opinion, but I think it would help clarify some of their talking points on both sides.
I don't think it's worth it. But I feel like it's too combative.
I just want to go over some numbers with you guys. We talked about this before. Kent County has a history of picking the winner. You pick the winner three times out of the last 4 presidential elections. In 2020, 187,915 people voted for Biden. 165,741 voted for Trump, a separation of about 22,000. It was closer in 2016. Will you be surprised if your candidate wins? Who do you think will win?
I really don't know, but I think Harris is going to win.
You think Harris is going to win even though you're going to support Trump?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised either way. I just, like all of you just said, you care about democracy. Like, Trump does not care about democracy. I think if you actually listen to him, you look at his actions around January 6th, you look at his actions leading up to the election, he will tell you time and time again, he cares about himself. He does not care about democracy.
I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm right down the middle at this point, in who could go.
You could see it go either or.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just because I've heard the numbers are so close right now, too.
Yeah. Are you going to be devastated if Harris wins?
What am I going to do? I mean, my life is going to go on. It's not like.
But you know there are people that are
I know,
very
and that's
upset
the thing. You need
either
to look
way.
you need to look at what has been done, not the person. I understand you don't like someone, but you can like somebody and not like somebody all day long. But you need to look at what they're doing.
That's
for
what
the
I'm looking at,
country and
exactly what
things.
he's doing, and that just scares me.
That's how I feel.
I will be very, very disappointed. Well, I hope Harris wins, but if she doesn't, our country's going to be in a lot of trouble. I really believe that.
Max?
I believe Trump's going to win.
Ellie?
I totally think it could be a flip of the coin. I think that there's going to be a lot of silent voters who are a lot of silent Trump or previously Trump supporters that are going to vote Kamala and just don't want to say it.
Well, we will be watching Kent County because you guys seemingly get it right more than you get it wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I'm going to, before we, you want to clap? Let's
Yeah,
clap.
I like
clapping. Yay!
Good job, everybody.
Just to start from some basics here, can you give me a show of hands? How many of you voters are going to cast your ballots for Donald Trump? Okay. Mary, you raised your hand. You are in the very important state of Arizona. What's driving your decision?
Well, my decision is I live right on the border in Yuma, Arizona, and I know in the last 3.5 years we have had just horrible problems in Yuma with a lot of illegal immigration coming through, our hospital, the one hospital we have, has almost had to shut down several times because we've had no money coming in, and the hospital is just it's just on the brink of foreclosure. It's just been really terrible. Our economy is awful. Yuma's unemployment is 16%. So the economy is a big factor as well. Just a combination of things. Our groceries have gone up. Like I said, the employment, the illegal immigration, just everything has just really gone downhill in the last 3.5 years for us in Yuma and Arizona completely. So that's one thing. I've also been to a Trump rally. I've been there. I see how much he cares for people, and I do believe that he can bring the economy back. I believe that he can bring things back to the way it was 4 years ago.
So, Mary, we're in this unique position where Donald Trump had been president before and is running again. So you did experience his policies. Are you happy with how he handled the global pandemic and COVID with shutting down the economy?
I think it was a unique situation that we had never faced before. I think he did the best that he could with some of the advice that he got from Dr. Fauci and from the CDC. I mean, he's not an expert in pandemics, and he's not a healthcare professional. I think he did the best that he could, and he tried to do the best that he could with what he was given. So he did get the vaccine, or so-called vaccine, pushed through as quickly as possible. And I think, I don't think anybody could have done any better at that point in time, because it was something that was unique. And now hindsight, if 4 years later, I think there's a lot of things that we would have done differently. I think anyone would have done differently. But at that point in time, I think with what we knew at that point, and with that unique initial strain of COVID, I think he did the best he could.
Cole, you are in Georgia, also a very key state. Why do you plan to vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah, thank you. I think my issue, I look at my voting as not voting on a single issue, but a variety of issues. And I also, for me, I do not look necessarily at the candidate specifically, but just the broader party and the direction they're hoping to take America. For me, some of the top 3 issues would definitely be our economy, immigration, and then I would also say, as we've come out of the pandemic, just seeing how the 2 different political parties handled the pandemic. Personally, in Georgia, I felt like our governor, Brian Kemp, did an amazing job handling that. I look at other states like California and Michigan that kept their schools closed for years longer than we did. And our youth did not see any significant health detriments compared to those other 2 states. And our students have been able to come out of that more successfully. I think Kamala Harris and the Democrats are a little bit too extreme on the issue of abortion. I do not support the idea of allowing abortion at 20 weeks of pregnancy, and certainly not with no restrictions. And so I would prefer candidates who are more aligned with my pro-life position.
That's interesting and specific there, Cole. You said you're not comfortable with candidates who would allow abortion at 20 weeks of pregnancy, which is sort of right just short of where viability is these days. Does that mean you like or you dislike former President Trump's position now, where he says he's just going to send it back to the states and doesn't want to have a national policy. He's sort of changed things a number of times over the years in terms of what he personally believes. Does that trouble you?
I think that's very valid. I know prior to becoming a politician, he was a little bit more pro-choice. When he started running for president the first time in 2016, he became more aligned with the pro-life movement. Listen, I think I agree with most Americans. We want exceptions for abortions on the issues of rape, health of the mother, fatal fetal abnormality, excuse me. But I definitely would prefer candidates who are more pro-life. I believe that allowing abortion for an elective reason at 20 weeks is really just immoral and unethical. I know there are many studies that show that fetuses can feel pain at that stage. With each passing year, our technology gets better and babies can be delivered early. So I would prefer more abortion restrictions. Recently in Georgia, we had our fetal heartbeat bill overturned, and that has been disappointing. For me, I'm not sure if I land right on the 6-week mark, but 20 weeks to me is quite a long time to go when you should have been able to make that decision earlier on. So either candidate, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, I don't think they're going to be able to touch the abortion issue. They're never going to have the votes in the Senate at 60. So I think at the end of the day, neither of them are going to be able to touch it too much. So I would prefer someone like Donald Trump, who allows the states to have more influence over that decision.
So the lack of moral clarity in the position doesn't trouble you, even though for you it's a moral issue?
Again, I realize that he's not a perfect candidate for me on that issue, but he certainly aligns more with me than Kamala Harris does. I think she wants to reinstate, from what she said, Roe v. Wade, which was a very ambiguous judicial decision, which was later expanded upon by the Planned Parenthood versus Casey ruling. I realize that maybe not everyone understands the nuances that go into that, but originally Roe v. Wade did not provide for restrictions on abortion. And so I believe that is far too loose of a system to allow in this nation.
Mike, you're in Nevada. You said you will be voting for Donald Trump, but he makes it hard. He makes it hard for you to feel good about that vote. Can you explain what you mean?
You know, there's parts of Donald Trump which I admire and parts of Donald Trump which I cringe, for lack of a better term. And, you know, in the debate when he said, you know, they just asked him, January 6th, would you change anything? I think he had an opportunity there to step up as a leader and take some ownership. People went to jail. People in his cabinet went to jail. I mean, it's like, you, as a leader, I think you have to own those things and move on. I think that would have showed a lot of courage for him to do that. So I like things on the economy, tightening up inflation. Yes, and yes. You know, I think those are the primary issues in this election. You know, as you get into the periphery and just how, you know, he conducts himself, sometimes it's hard to put a Trump side in the front yard based on some of his behaviors.
But you're still doing it. Why?
Well, because I'm a fan of the economy and a fan of success, right? So I live in Nevada, right next door to California. I see what those policies have done and decimated the great state of California. So I would just as soon, be more pragmatic in how we drive the economy. I think there's been no driver in the driver's seat in our economy for the last 3.5 years. And I think we've suffered mightily for it. I think inflation, as both candidates now are pitching tax reform or tax cuts. I'm a CPA by trade. Half of the people in the United States don't pay tax, and they're the most vulnerable out there. The only thing you can do to help those folks is really layer back inflation, layer back interest rates, give people their purchasing power back for the wages they do earn. And I think when you look at the real standard of living for a lot of people, if you're looking today versus 3-4 years ago, they are significantly worse off today just because their dollar doesn't go as farther don't go as far, I should say, and interest rates are killing them. So that's where it's like that drives a lot for me. I don't have to like people personally. I don't have to agree with some of the stuff they do, but I have to, kind of go for the greater good. I do wish he'd make it a little bit easier, though.
What are you thinking of when you say that?
I think if you can ingratiate yourself to the electorate, that's good. I think it's a good sign of leadership. And I'll give you an example of that. So when they asked him, if he lost the election, I thought, here's your chance, President Trump, here's your chance. All you got to do is say, I believe I should have won that election, but I lost all of my legal remedies. So as soon as there were no more legal remedies in a nation of laws, I'm no longer the president. I don't have to like it. I can do everything I can to change those things that I think were flawed in the system, but I didn't win that election. And I think that would have gone light years ahead for his own personal agenda, because he would have showed that, okay, he can accept things. So I guess that's where I'd fall on that one.
Christopher, you are in North Carolina. How are people doing there amidst the fallout from this storm, and what makes you an enthusiastic Republican right now?
I've always been an enthusiastic Republican since I voted for Ronald Reagan in 1980. I've been fortunate enough to be part of Trump's ground campaign in 2016, and I met some very amazing people. And again, I will accentuate not the Republican Party's ground team, the Trump ground team. So
you worked for the Trump campaign in 2016.
I was a volunteer.
Okay. Are you doing that this year?
Not at the moment. There's more health issues involved now than there were back 8 years ago. But I'm trying to help wherever I can. But what I will say is I really, really like the maturation process that he's gone through. He got his feet wet in 2016. He learned the hard way. He got tagged a few times. He stepped in it a lot. That's when I heard somewhere one of the famous scientists say, if you fall flat on your face, you're going in the right direction. So you're going forward. But the team he has together right now, you have a Kennedy, J.D. Vance, which you had the opportunity to talk with him a week or so ago. Kelsey Gabbard? I can't get her name right, but
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi. Yeah, I apologize. Don't shoot me. But it's a very dynamic and experienced team with they're not all yes people. They provide a different point of perspective that he can draw from. Some comments were made before, and they were very valid by everybody. We wish he could do this or that, and I remember when we spoke about COVID, a true leader gathers all the intel he can at that point in time to make the best decision he can by the information that's given to him by his general. Hindsight's an exact science. After every business meeting or business activity, especially, we all do. You do, and after the show, you have a post-mortem. It's easy to look in the rearview mirror and say could have, should have, and would have. But when you're in the moment, you make the best decisions you can at the time. I trust him to do that. I trust him to make a decision. And he has made a lot of good decisions. The economy. I'm paying 150% more for groceries. Gasoline, I was paying $1.50. Now, I filled it up, it's over $3. Inflation. These things are proven track records he has, and he can tackle them. He doesn't have a long list. I'm looking at the 20 points. Inflation, economy, get people back to work, give corporate tax incentives to build inside America and sell in America.
But do you, Christopher, ever feel uncomfortable, like Mike said he did, with things that Donald Trump says?
At some times I have, but then I heard or somebody made a very prophetic statement that First of all, and I had to go back to when he was first being queried about being president back in the 90s by Oprah and everybody else. And people, I think, from your news organization as well were talking to him about it. But this is Donald Trump. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. He's not a figurehead. He never has been. He never will be. I'd rather hear, now remember, I'm from North Carolina. We had Jesse Helms. He was pretty blunt and to the point, but you never had to guess where the man stood. And that's one of the things I like about Trump. But in this day and age, with what we're being faced with, on the global stage, and the not so nice characters that will look for a weak spot in the United States of America to bring her to her knees, I'd rather have in the ocean full of bloody water shark, great white sharks, I'd rather have an orca in there than Flipper protecting me. And I know Donald Trump will get in there and he will fight for us. He may not say what we want to hear, but he will execute on our behalf. And it's obvious. The man nearly died. He took a bullet for us. He got back up again. And you cannot dismiss that. And his instinct was to say, fight. So that right there tells me this man doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
He's doing what he's doing for us. And that's why I like his policies. I like who he's surrounded himself with that have all these divergent points of view. And that tells me he's in it to win for us.
Okay. Show of hands on this question too. How many of you would be comfortable with the first female president and female commander-in-chief? Raise your hand. Mary, you put it up late there. Sorry. How many of you are planning to vote for Vice President Harris in November? I want to dive into exactly why that is. Linda, and then Kathy, why are you supporting Vice President Harris for president?
First voted for Reagan in '80 as well. And all of my voting years, I was told character counts. And as I look at Donald Trump, I either have to say character counts and not vote for him, or say it doesn't count anymore. I did vote for him in 2016. I voted for Joe Biden in 2020, and I will vote for Kamala Harris this year.
That's interesting that you voted for Trump, then Biden, now you're going to vote for Harris. These are very different people. What is driving your decision now?
I have listened to Kamala Harris and the things she has to say. I truly believe she cares about people. I think her life shows she cares about people. And she truly wants to work to make our day in and day out lives better now. And I care about now, but I have grandchildren. And I care about what kind of a world we're going to give them to build on as they become people to vote in the next few years. And again, I go back to character counts. And Donald Trump is a proven liar. It's like every week there's something new in the news that we are learning about him being dishonest. And I cannot vote for him. I just cannot do it. He has said and done too many things that I think should be disqualifying, from January 6th to those poor people in Springfield, Ohio. They must just be terrified. He says if he is elected, he's going to start deporting people from Springfield. They're here legally contributing to their community. That has to be terrifying for them. And I want to be able to look my grandsons in their eyes and tell them I voted for someone who lives the way I tell them I want them to be, people who live with character in their own lives. And if character counts, then I cannot vote for Donald Trump.
Linda gave us the view from Michigan. Kathy, you're in Pennsylvania. Why are you voting for Vice President Harris?
I am not a single issue voter. I look at the broad spectrum of what is going on in our country, and not just our country, but my state, my local community. And I hear and see the fears that people have just contemplating another 4 years with Donald Trump. I don't have anything that I can think of that I would say I agree with him on. And I, like Linda, would say, to me, character counts. I grew up with you're known by the company you keep. And the company he keeps and aligns himself with do not seem like the people to me that I want contributing to what's going to be happening in the future to my state, to my community, or my country. So Donald Trump is a no for me. And also on the, I can't vote for someone that I just look at and don't trust. That's where I'm coming from.
What about you, Mauricio? You are joining us from Wisconsin.
I ditto what the previous two ladies said 100%. January 6th to me is beyond unacceptable. That's sacred territory that was stormed. He riled up that. It was not a protest. That was an insurrection. The plans were to overthrow a legitimate election. That will never be tolerated in my viewpoint, as it's been excuses by everybody that supports him. Well, you know, it was a protest. No, it wasn't a protest. That was planned. The day before, he texted, "Be there, it's going to be big." In front of that crowd, he said, "I'm marching with you there." He inspired this to happen. Beyond that, his morality. Have you ever met anybody that said, "I want my child to grow up to be like Donald Trump"? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, Mauricio, that's interesting. You put January 6th, and I guess you would say the state of our democracy at risk here. But I wonder, do you believe that Vice President Harris, if she is elected president, that she will be very different from Joe Biden? Or do you see her continuing the issues and agenda that he has pursued for the past 4 years?
I'm sure she's probably a little bit more liberal, but she would accept the results if she lost. And that's big to me. I'm a centrist moderate. I want to get back to the days of Bill Clinton and surplus budgets. We have a $36 trillion debt. Nobody talks about it either side. Both parties are responsible for it, and they blame each other when they're not in power. And when they get in power, they spend just like the previous. I mean, Donald Trump ran up more debt in 4 years than any president in the history of this country. Biden is also running up a massive debt, as Obama and Bush did. And I'm sure that's going to continue under Harris as well. But there's no way that I could look at myself in the mirror if I voted for Donald Trump.
You know, it's interesting, Mike, I want to come to you here because Mauricio just laid out something that you used to hear a lot about from Republicans. That was this issue of fiscal conservatism, of the debt load on this country from spending. And Congress will have a say in that. But when you look at the projections for the two agendas, Donald Trump and his policies look like they will add more to the debt than Vice President Harris's proposals to date. Does that give you any pause? As you said, you're a CPA, you're an accountant, you know numbers.
You know, I am not a fan of layering more debt. I think, you know, I think there's ways to get there without layering on that kind of debt. I think one of the things that I really appreciated Donald Trump doing in his first administration is really started to look at government and cut things that needed to be cut, and I think I give him a lot of credit for that, and he took a lot of heat for it. So, but I look at his policy, and I was interviewed by Reuters last week, and they were like, well, there's a lot of things that they're aligned on, increasing the debt. And I said, well, I don't know if that's pandering for votes or what, but I don't think it's overall good. I think, and you look at what's happening now with a lot of this debt, virtually zero interest debt coming due. And so if you look at how that feels as a country, and I would tell my clients the same thing, is, you're layering all this debt, but this, pretty much zero interest rate debt is being replaced with 5% debt on the trillions of dollars. And we haven't felt that yet. We haven't felt the sting of having to make those interest payments yet, because we're just retiring this zero debt. But it's coming. And so the only way to do anything about that is you have to throttle back inflation and get the interest rate back. And also the thing that creates debt is spending, which creates inflation. So, but yeah, everybody wants to have their hand out when they're getting all the goodies. It saw it in spades in COVID. Everybody wanted to get their bite at the apple so that they got their benefit, but we had, and that's what caused the inflation. There was so much money in the system, right? And that's what drove up that debt is the stimulus that went out through COVID that ended up creating inflation, but we haven't done the hard work to roll it back. And that's what I mean is with Biden's policy of keeping his hands off the steering wheel of the economy. And you really had, and I remember Obama did this. He did a lot of things to temper inflation and temper the economy so that we didn't have this runaway inflation. And so was I happy about it at the time? Not necessarily, right? Because, gosh, I wish we had more capital, but I saw that was good for the country. So that way, it's, because if you want to really depress things, lose your purchasing power through inflation, lose your buying power through paying more in interest, and the whole system really starts to get strained. So that's where I wish anybody would talk about it. I agree with Mauricio. I think it's one of those things that nobody's really talking about, that we all are, kind of keeps us up at night. Because to Linda's point, I don't want to layer my grandkids or my kids with that debt.
Mm-hmm. Linda, back to the original question I asked Mauricio as well. As a Harris supporter, do you believe that the vice president would continue Joe Biden's policies, or do you think she has a different vision for the country?
I think she will do some of the things President Biden has done. And some of the things Biden has done has helped our country quite a bit. Unemployment has gone down. The interest rates are coming back down. And he kept us from being like most of the other G7 countries as they came out of COVID, where our economy is doing better than theirs are. And so those are good things. I think she has some of her own ideas of how to do things. I like that she wants to reinstate the child tax credit, increasing that like it was at the end of COVID. I think child poverty went down when that was there, and I think that was a good thing. I like her ideas for helping people to get their own home. Homes are so expensive, and so I'm happy to hear she wants to do that. I would like to hear more specifics of what she plans to do, but I would much rather see someone want to give tax breaks to the middle class than the most wealthy people in our country, which is what Trump wants to do. And I do think a tariff would be devastating to our economy. Everything. I mean, we get so many things from other countries, from coffee and bananas to glasses. I mean, it would impact so many areas of our everyday lives. And if our dollars don't go as far now, just wait until there's a huge tariff on them. So I think she will have ideas which will continue some of the policies of Biden, which have been successful. And I think she will have changes in things where she thinks maybe we can do better.
Kathy, what about you? Does the vice president represent change to you, or will she continue Joe Biden's vision?
I'd have to agree with Linda as far as I believe she will continue some of the positive things that have happened during the Biden administration, but I also believe she has some different views of how things could be for America and the American people. And I would look forward to seeing who she ends up putting around her in her cabinet to help her know more about those things and accomplish those things to move us forward. Because that's what I would like to see, is us moving forward and upward, not stagnant, not going backward.
Margaret, would it be okay if I just weighed in a little bit on what Linda said about tariffs versus taxes? Just for a second.
I think Cole also was trying to get in there. Cole, do you want to go first?
No, he can go first, and then I'll follow up.
Okay, sure. Well, and that's where I've been doing the CPA thing for 30 years. George Bush III said we got to cut corporate taxes. Obama said we got to cut corporate taxes. Trump cut corporate taxes so that we're kind of competitive again in the world landscape. A corporate tax is exactly the same as a tariff, right? Anything that we're charging corporations who transact most of the business in our country, if we layer on that tax, they have to push that through to the consumer. They have to have margin. They have to have space to be profitable. It's just how it works. Every sitting president in my adult life has said the same thing. So they rolled that back to 21%. I thought this is actually genius. And then the other genius of that was they got no press. They taxed all of the foreign profits. So Microsoft, Apple, all these big companies, they had to now pay tax on all this money they've parked offshore for all these decades, right? So that was a windfall for the Treasury. I thought that's smart, right? So you're like, okay, we're giving you a little bit of love here, but no more games with this offshore stuff. They got completely a pass for taxes. And so when I see them saying, hey, we're gonna juice taxes, back into the 30% range again, believe you me, every one of us on this call is going to be paying our share of that tax when that gets pushed out to these corporations. There is no pass.
Cole, was that your comment as well, or did you have a different idea?
No, I just wanted to follow up on this idea of how future President Harris might or may not be different than President Biden. Mm-hmm. And Kamala Harris went on The View this week, and they asked her a question. They said, what would you have done differently than President Biden? And I'll be honest with you, I do not envy Kamala Harris, because she has to defend President Biden, and she also has to kind of thread the needle of following his policies, maybe making some of her own. But listen, there have been some failures in this administration, and I think whether you're on the left or the right, you can hopefully see that. And for me, some of those things off the top of my head were we did not have a good withdrawal from Afghanistan. Prices are through the roof for consumers, and we can debate how we got at that. But at the end of the day, inflation is out of control, and there have been a record number of illegal border crossings under the Biden administration. And so I understand that she has to appeal to the base, and she doesn't want to alienate any Biden voters. But it's very shocking to me that there's not one thing that she could think of that she would have done differently than President Biden. Because even if I was, Trump's running mate, I would, and I had to run after him, I would say, here's one or two things that maybe I would have done differently. And if she can't admit that, then she's either blinded or she is unwilling to admit the truth. That's just my opinion.
Cole, just to follow up on that. So when you hear Senator J.D. Vance reverse his positions now to align them with Trump, do you judge him the same way?
Well, I mean, I think he said that even on the debate stage when, y'all were there, he said that he doesn't align with Trump on everything. That's something that he's been very forthright about. And even now, I don't know that he is 100% sharing the same vision as Donald Trump. Obviously, they're running mates. I do understand that, he has flip-flopped, and that's something I can acknowledge and admit and say that I don't know how I feel about that. But again, Kamala Harris is having to say not one thing she would have done differently. And I could not believe she would have said that. Just from a PR perspective, if I was running her campaign, I
Mhm.
would be shocked and horrified.
Show of hands. Who considers, Cole, you've been clear on this point already, but show of hands, who is concerned about the issue of abortion and reproductive health care going into this election? Okay. Mary, you're not raising your hand. You live in a state where abortion access is currently permitted up to 15 weeks. You're good with that where it is? It's not a motivating factor for you, even though abortion will be on the ballot in Arizona?
It's up to 17 weeks. And no, the way I feel is that I'm more concerned about women's health. And I think that we need to concentrate on prevention of unplanned pregnancies, not using abortion as birth control. That's the way I feel. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I think that that's what it should be. I think 17 weeks is a good amount of time. In 10 days, the birth control, I'm 66 years old, so I've seen the backdoor abortions and the botched abortions and things like that that happened in the old days. But now we have a ton of different birth control methods compared to what we had 50 years ago. Also, our birth control tests are so much better. In 10 days, you can find out if you're pregnant. 10 to 21 days, you can find out whether or not you're pregnant. And so I just think that we should not use abortion as a means of birth control. Now, of course, just like everyone else had said, rape, incest, problems with the pregnancy, things like that. Of course, I can understand having an abortion and you find out later in your pregnancy that something's wrong with the baby. Okay, that's a different story. But as far as just using it for birth control, I don't believe in that. I think 17 weeks is a good amount of time to figure out whether or not you want to carry that baby to term or not for that period of time.
Would you, Mary, like to hear candidate Donald Trump and candidate J.D. Vance echo your beliefs? They avoid talking about the specifics. You were very specific at 17 weeks. Cole was very specific at 20 weeks. Would you like the candidates to be that specific?
Well, the specifics is Arizona law, and that's what you asked me was Arizona law, and 17 weeks is Arizona law. And so I'm okay with that. I mean, it is what it is, and that's 17 weeks. So,
but it doesn't matter to you that at the federal level, the candidates don't necessarily agree with you.
At the federal level, and the reason why it was brought back to the states is that different states have different feelings. California is much more liberal than Arizona or Texas or Oklahoma or Georgia or other areas of the country. And just like Trump said, look at Kansas. Kansas has become more liberal than they used to be. And that's very true. But the main focus is women's health. Women and what's taught in schools, nothing anymore. I mean, they're not I think we need to focus on prevention. And I think women need to be given the opportunity to know what's offered to them. And it bothers me to think that women are not given that opportunity. They're not given, the opportunities to take care of themselves and take care of their health. And, I just think that we're missing something here. We're missing a big part of this, which is women's health. And I think the other part that we're missing is the mental health piece. That I have taken care of women that had to have abortions, and their mental health is terrible. I've seen them wake up crying, and to have to make that decision is terrible. And so I think we need to take that into consideration as well and take care of the whole patient, not just say, okay, you can have an abortion up to whatever weeks, you know?
I know, Mike, you want to weigh in too, but just to follow up with you, Mary, you're saying 17 weeks. The Arizona government website says 15 weeks of pregnancy. Abortion is permitted up to that point. Why do you think 17 weeks?
Well, 15, 17. I mean, the thing about it is that I think they have to make a cutoff somewhere. They have to make a cutoff somewhere. And 15 to 17 weeks is a cutoff period I can live with. You know, I think when you get past 17 weeks, then you're getting to the point where the fetus is viable. And, you know, babies can be born between 20 and 24 weeks and live. So I think that people need to make a decision before they're getting to the point where the baby's viable and you know, you're getting to a point of that it's just, you know, out of
Well, I know I want to get to Mike on this too, and I see you raising your hands as well there, Kathy. But the reason I'm asking you about the issue being on the ballot is because it literally will be in the state of Arizona, in the state of Nevada as well, that this coinciding with the presidential election. So, Mike, for you, does it bother you, or are you happy that the Republican candidate has not stated a clear position on what for some people is a moral issue and is instead saying it should go to either popular vote or let the legislature decide?
Well, as much as I dislike the whole concept of abortion, I also believe everybody has their right to decide what they're good with. And I don't want to tell people what's right for them, and I don't want my federal government telling me what's right for me. I get to choose. I get to make that decision. And I think as that, and I believe what Trump's position is we're going to push that out. It is already pushed out to the states. The states can vote their conscience. And I'm okay with that. I may not agree with it, but I think it's good. And it is interesting because I live in Nevada, right next to California. We call it the Californication of the state of Nevada. And their people are fleeing California because of a lot of the stuff they do, and they end up here in Nevada. And we try and accept them, but we just say the reason you came here is you left something, so please don't ruin it for everybody. So and the same is true for abortion. So but what's happening now? We have a bill on the ballot that is talking about not being able to limit access to abortions. I disagree with that. I know how I'm going to vote on it, but I believe, just as a matter of principle, that Texas, which is very conservative, Elon Musk, he had a choice of putting his headquarters in Nevada or Texas. And he chose Texas because of all the great things that they're doing in Texas, and we're too liberal. We're too liberal on how we look at labor relations. We're too liberal, a lot of things, and so they made a decision to go to Texas. Well, guess what? Now all those thousands and thousands of people get to they get the Texas abortion law. So and how they look at it, and I think that's going to come into the entire gambit of when people decide where they move their company, where they move their family, and where they align with. And I think that's good. I think it just allows people to make informed decisions so they can vote their conscience. And if people would rather be more conservative, they can move to more conservative places. People are, more liberal. God bless them. I respect their ability to make those decisions. But I don't want the federal, that's just, when they ask me like how I self-identified, as a Republican or Democrat, I'm a conservative. I go, because I want less government. I don't want government. I don't want government in my business, and I definitely don't want government in my body.
Kathy, you raised your hand. This is an issue that's important to you.
It is. I have daughters and granddaughters, and I would hope that the decision of something that serious would be allowed to be made by them and their healthcare provider, not by someone sitting on a bench or in a boardroom or wherever, making that decision for them to be able to or not to be able to control their own body And of course, we should be presenting the alternatives and the pregnancy planning, et cetera. But that's just not the case, and it's not realistic. And it's not realistic to believe if you like this liberal law better, everyone can just move where they want to. Those things just aren't realistic.
If you could raise your hand in answer to this question, how many people are concerned about the security of the upcoming election? Are you confident that your vote will be counted and that it will be free and fair and secure? Raise your hand if you are concerned.
Oh,
Are we concerned that our vote will be counted, or are we concerned about the election integrity? I'm confused.
Well, that's arguably the same thing. I'll put it a different way. Who is confident that their vote will be counted and the election will be secure in 2024? Who is confident?
Confident will be counted? Yes.
Yes. So only about
Those are conflicting questions. There's a difference between there's a difference between whether I'm confident my vote will be counted or whether a drop box will be full of 20 names or people that aren't supposed to be voting. There's a big difference.
Well, why do you think that your vote would be valid, but you would question the validity of others?
Well, it's like I said, a drop box. Arizona, 218,000 people just showed up miraculously, or were I don't know what the specifics, what they were, duplicates or everything. First, they said it was 20-some thousand, then 212 or 218,000. Bingo. Where did they come from?
You live in North Carolina. Are you confident that the state which administers the election will do so securely?
I think we have voter ID last time I checked. So with that, yes.
Sorry, Mauricio.
I've got to say something. This is something. There's an election integrity in this country. Every time that Trump went to court to claim voter fraud, it was 60 sometimes, often in front of Republican judges, even judges that were appointed by him. There was zero fraud proven. There are small little bits of fraud in the system, but it's nothing consequential that would change the result of an election. On all of those ballots that there were Republicans that won on, that Trump was on and claimed voter fraud, and that those Republicans actually won, not one of them is questioning integrity and integrity on that ballot. It's a conspiracy theory. That's all it is. It's part of Trump's plot. It's part of Trump's style on how he runs to try and convince people and scare people about things that don't exist. And another example would be this thing he did with FEMA, where, the conspiracies he started with that. That's what he does. I'll leave it at that.
62,
okay, well then I'll
62
what,
legal cases,
states.
Mauricio.
62. Okay, I knew it was 60 something, but there was zero fraud. Zero fraud.
If you feel that way, put voter ID in. You have to put an ID to get a job.
Prove that there's fraud. You talk about states' rights. Each state runs the election the way they want to because they have state rights. That's your big thing, state rights. So each state runs their election in the manner that they see fit. So, but I have no problem with a voter ID. That's fine. If that's the way that state wants to do it, that's fine. But to sit there and claim conspiracy theories, to insult the integrity of elections and scare people to think that their vote didn't actually count when it did. I mean, that's what we've come to in this country. It's ridiculous.
Mike?
So, and that's where in my state, Nevada, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there were, I think, legitimate questions that were raised in my state, and I don't believe we've addressed them. That's my concern. I think they're all addressable, and I think to ensure the integrity, and that's just prudent. That okay, let's just go through the rigor of find out where could there be these problems, Mauricio, in the system, in our respective state systems, and shore them up so that we feel good about it. I think that's just prudent. So okay, we questioned it, we looked at, and Nevada didn't look at it. That's what my concern is.
You're frustrated with your governor. it sounds
Right.
like. Cole.
My old government, not the new one.
Well,
Cole.
I voted for Donald Trump in 2020. I do think the election was conducted mostly fairly, and I do believe that Joe Biden legitimately won. But like he was just saying, I think that there are some issues with voter confidence, and I do think that comes from both sides of the political aisle. And some of the problems that we've experienced, I think Donald Trump's rhetoric has certainly inflamed those fears in a lot of people. But listen, there should have been no reason that it took weeks to certify election results in Nevada and in Arizona. You know, in Arizona's previous gubernatorial election, I don't know if I said that word right, but it took them 3 weeks to certify that election. In Pennsylvania, the state legislature had a very clear deadline. They had a state law that said all of the votes must be counted by this date. All of the absentee ballots must be counted by this date. And their Democratic-controlled state Supreme Court said, no, because of the pandemic, we're going to, after the fact, extend the deadline. And so to me, while I do believe that Joe Biden did come out on top fair and square, I think those are things that really make me less confident in the results of our election. If a state as massive as Florida can have their election results certified in 24 hours, why are all of these other states taking weeks to do the same thing? And that's my concern. And that's something that I think, you know, there may not be fraud, but there are cracks in the system that we have to address.
Raise your hand if you are concerned about violence in the next few weeks or months. Most of you are not. Kathy, you are.
Only
Why?
because of the past history and this being such a sort of, what do I say, not contested election, but just such an important and sort of defining moment in our democracy and election system. I can see that it could happen. I'm not like personally worried. I'm worried for the people that could be close to it and become embroiled in some kind of a violent situation.
Well, the FBI has warned about concern and anti-government violence and election workers, and let's just hope for the sake of our democracy that that none of that does happen. Kathy, thank you for sharing your concerns with us. Thanks to all of you for making the time this evening to share with us what's on your plates, what's on your minds, and what's motivating your vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.